Andrew was in the kitchen with Jake, Aidan, and Charles when Lewis's call came through. Answering the phone, he said, "Hello?" His eyes briefly settled on Dr. Evangeline Hart, who was seated on one side of the table, quietly eating her food. A subtle smile tugged at his lips as he recalled how Miss Jonas had practically dragged Dr. Hart downstairs, with Noria and Anita taking over to watch the baby before she finally agreed to take a break. The young doctor had been avoiding eye contact with any of them, even as she offered a polite greeting. Andrew couldn't blame her, though. Jake had been acting unusually withdrawn. He figured he might need to talk to Jake about the girl to stop him from unintentionally scaring her. "Andrew, are you with the boss?" came Lewis's voice, snapping him back to the phone call. "No. Why?" Andrew asked, his brow furrowing. "Mr. Blackwood just got bad news about his mom. She's dead and he's not taking it well," Lewis informed him. "What?" Andrew exclaimed, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. Realizing where he was, he quickly lowered his voice and said, "Hold on. I'll get Mr. Sterndale to come for him. I'll inform the boss and Dr. Hawthorne." "What happened?" Jake asked as he got up, with Aidan and Charles joining him. "Mrs. Blackwood is dead," Andrew said quietly. "Whoa," Charles muttered, while Jake nodded grimly in acknowledgement. "I need to get Alex Sterndale to help bring him in," Andrew said as he moved towards the exit. "How can I help?" Jake asked, knowing full well what Ethan Blackwood's mother had meant to him. "I'll get a car ready," Aidan said. "Good," Andrew replied. "Jake, can you go with them, please?" "Of course," Jake agreed, hurrying after Aidan, deliberately avoiding looking in Dr. Hart's direction, though he could feel her eyes burning into his back as he left. Andrew found Alex and Anna with Nathaniel and Dr. Hawthorne in the makeshift theatre. He paused as he entered, but Nathaniel immediately caught the hesitation and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" Nathaniel asked, giving him a sharp look. "Lewis just called from the office. Blackwood got a call from Europe," Andrew said. As soon as the words left his mouth, Alex stood up. Nathaniel sat up straighter and Aria placed Nathaniel's medical chart aside to give Andrew her full attention. It was as if they all instinctively knew what was coming. "Mrs. Blackwood is dead," Andrew delivered. A stunned silence followed before Nathaniel looked at Alex, who promptly responded, "I'll go get him," and moved without hesitation, with Anna immediately following him. "We'll be waiting downstairs when you return," Nathaniel said as his friends hurried out. Aria didn't attempt to dissuade him. She understood how devastating this news must be for Ethan, and she knew Nathaniel wanted to show his support no matter what. Aria found their friendship deeply inspiring. When Alex and Anna reached the front porch, Aidan had already prepared the car and was sitting behind the wheel, with Jake waiting by the front passenger seat. Seeing Alex and Anna rushing down the stairs, Jake quickly opened the back door and stepped aside. "Thank you, Jake," Alex said as he helped Anna into the car. Once they were settled, he shut the door and climbed in. The car's interior was eerily silent, with everyone lost in their thoughts about the recent tragedy. However, Jake's mind soon drifted back to earlier that day, when he, Aidan, Charles, and Anton had seen Dr. Hart jotting down study guides and outlines from the General Educational Development site. "Now, this is what I call multitasking," Aidan teased, his tone light but infused with warmth. Dr. Hart had jumped, nearly dropping her iPad. If Charles hadn't anticipated her reaction and grabbed the device before it hit the floor, it would have shattered. "Oh my God, you're here!" she'd exclaimed, her cheeks darkening as Charles handed her iPad back. Thank you, she had stammered, offering him a grateful smile. Jake remembered how he had felt a tad weird that the look hadn't been directed at him. "It's all good," Charles had replied, flashing a warm smile down at her. "So are you moonlighting as a teacher now or something?" Aidan had chimed in with a teasing grin. Dr. Hart had given a sheepish smile. "Just trying to keep a promise and give her a bit of a head start, that's all," she had said, still avoiding Jake's eyes. "I'm sure she'll really appreciate that," Aidan had remarked gratefully. It was at that moment Jake had pieced it together. Dr. Hart was preparing a study guide for Noria. He felt his heart soften slightly at the thought of her helping Aidan's girl. "That's awfully nice of you," Anton had chimed in. "It's nothing," Dr. Hart had said, quickly packing up her notepad and stepping away from the incubator. "Excuse me," she'd added, clearly flustered. When she made to leave, Jake had called after her. "Dr. Hart." She had turned around but still wouldn't meet his eyes. "Sir," she'd responded, "we need a daily report on how the baby is responding to the biosync womb incubator. Do you think that's something you can do with Noria?" he asked. "Of course. We'll write it up and send it to you via email, if that's okay," she'd replied, finally looking at him for the first time. Jake had nodded in acknowledgement. "How soon can we get the first report?" he had asked in a businesslike tone. "Before the end of today," she had responded. "Good," he'd said, turning away from her in a dismissive sweep and directing his attention back to his baby. Moments later, Jake heard the door to the adjoining room open and close quietly behind her. "Is it just me, or is Jake being especially cold to the young doctor?" Anton had quipped. "Shut up, Anton, she can probably hear you," Aiden had replied, cutting off that line of conversation. Jake wasn't sure of how he felt about slowly discovering that Dr. Hart seemed like a decent person. Not that it mattered to him, he supposed. He figured he was just relieved, considering she was responsible for his son. He figured it would make sense to repay her by getting rid of her problem as well. He just had to wait for Captain to get back to him about going to the correctional facility to meet the Luke Greetum. He tried not to dwell on how he had felt when she had finally looked him in the eye, her gaze intense and almost hypnotizing. The sound of Aiden parking the car in front of Farram Hawthorne snapped Jake out of his thoughts. He quickly got out to open the door for Miss Morris, while Alex exited from the other side, running around the back of the Jeep to join Jake and Anna. Jake led them into the company's lobby, nodding at employees who greeted him as they passed by on the way to the elevator. Upstairs, Lewis met them in the hallway leading to Nathaniel Hawthorne's office. Alex hurried in and saw Ethan standing by the glass wall, his back turned to the door. A well-dressed woman wearing silver-rimmed glasses stood not far from him. When she turned at the sound of their entrance, Alex noticed how strikingly pretty she was, with striking eyes. "Ah, so this is why Ethan seemed rattled yesterday," Alex thought. "Ethan?" he called, striding toward him. Ethan didn't respond at first. He tilted his head slightly upon hearing Alex's voice, but remained silent. "I'm sorry, man," Alex rasped, stopping just a couple of inches away. Ethan nodded, but still didn't meet his gaze. Then, when Anna wrapped her arms around him from behind, his strong resolve seemed to crumble. His shoulders shook as he began to cry. Alex pulled him into a tight hug, murmuring, "I got you, bro." Jake crossed the room to join them, giving Ethan a reassuring pat on the back. "It's okay, Blackwood. She died doing exactly what she always wanted, traveling the world. You made that possible for her." "Remember that," Jake said. Ethan nodded again, acknowledging Jake's words, though his grief was still palpable. Alex held on to him, understanding that Ethan needed to let it out. "Wouldn't it be great to record you right now for the boss's payback for when he lost his parents?" "Look at you acting like a big baby," Jake teased. He recalled how, when Nathaniel's parents had passed, Ethan had tried to snap him out of his grief by jokingly telling their friend, right in Nathaniel's hearing, that Nathaniel had decided to lose both parents at once, instead of the usual one-by-one approach like everyone else. Ethan managed to smile through his tears. "I just lost my mum, Jake. Give me a break. I'll be back to my usual a-hole self in a minute," he quipped, prompting laughter from everyone. When Ethan finally drew back from Alex, Jake pulled him in for a quick hug before Ethan turned to Anna, wrapping his arms around her. "Thanks, Anna," he rasped, noticing her red, puffy eyes. Anna cupped the side of his face gently. "I'm so sorry, Ethan, but we're here for you. We'll always be here," she said softly. Ethan nodded in gratitude. "Let's get you home," Jake said. Ethan lifted his gaze toward the right corner of the office, spotting Isla Devereaux patiently standing there. Their eyes met and held, and for the first time in his life, Ethan didn't know how to feel or what to say to her. He gave her a small nod, and she mirrored the gesture with a faint, almost tentative smile. Jake gently guided him out of the office, with Alex, Anna, and Lewis following close behind. Back at the Hawthorne estate, Arya helped Nathaniel get dressed so they could go downstairs together to the foyer to meet Ethan when he arrived. She assisted him in putting on grey joggers and a button-up shirt that wouldn't disturb the tubes still attached to him, but was loose enough to cover his bandages. After wrapping a shawl loosely around his neck, she tied his hair back atop his head while standing between his legs. As Nathaniel reached out to frame her hips, Lifting her loose blouse to peek under it at her bandaged stitches, Arya paused. He slowly lowered his face to press a kiss to her belly button, sending an electric shiver through her. She instinctively dug her fingers into his thick hair. "Thank you, my precious. You are my angel, Ariana," he whispered, his voice low and gruff with emotion. Arya cradled his head and pressed a kiss on his forehead. When he tilted his face upward, she held his gaze and gradually lowered her face to kiss him, capturing his upper lip and delving her tongue between his lips to explore his mouth. Nathaniel felt his entire frame quiver. The surge of emotion was more intense than usual. "You're killing me. I want you, and I can't have you. Stop it," he whispered. Arya giggled, playfully biting his lower lip and eliciting a sharp intake of breath from him. "It's game on, Mrs. Hawthorne. You do realize that with a new heart and no cancer holding me down, at least for now, I'm going to return to my vigorous self. And that, my darling, is game over for you. All this teasing and getting away with it must end," he growled, prompting Arya to giggle softly. They held each other tightly as she continued to pepper kisses across his face. "You're cancer-free, and that's what your test results keep saying, Nathan. Please believe it," she whispered, her tone somber as she scrutinized him closely. There was a pregnant pause before Nathaniel responded. "Waking up after the surgery, Arya, I was freezing. It felt like the way I used to before you came back to me," he said in an emotional whisper. "That was because the room was cool, and you had just undergone major surgery. People react to pain in different ways, my love. You had a hole in your chest, and you were coming to," Arya said, not realizing she was crying. The back of her throat felt choked with emotions, as if she were reliving the entire ordeal all over again. "Will you test me again? Please," he rasped, reaching up to wipe the tears from her face. Arya nodded, conceding. "I want the long, happy life you always promised me whenever your eyes find mine, Ariana. And I want to give that to you too. Yes, I have anxiety and fear that the damn cancer may come back. Help me quell that thought and feeling, please," he breathed. Arya lowered her face and kissed him again. Nathaniel tightened his hold against her. A short while later, as the two of them, followed by Adam, Jordan, and Andrew, made their way out of the room with their fingers interlaced, they met Tom just coming out of the elevator. He stopped in his tracks when he saw them, his eyes immediately clouding with worry. "This looks like more than just a walk down the hallway. Why are you two dressed like you're going out?" Tom asked, his voice betraying his agitation. "Blackwood lost his mother. I'm just going downstairs to meet with him," Nathaniel replied. "Wow, that's sad, but I think he can come meet you up here, no?" Tom said. He felt sorry for the Blackwood boy, but if he remembered correctly, the mother had been absent for nearly 7 years. It was sad she was gone, but Tom didn't think the boy would struggle too much without her. Now, Nate risking his health for this was just preposterous. "I'm required to walk around, Tom. I don't think it makes a difference if I take the elevator down to the foyer," Nathaniel replied, his voice sharp with irritation. "Dr. Hawthorne, you condone this," Tom chided lightly. "And you, shouldn't you be moving around so much?" he added. "I promise it will be quick," Arya responded. She knew better than to take sides when Tom and Nathaniel were having their father-son standoff, and the fact that he was worried about her warmed her heart. "All right then," Tom said reluctantly, stepping back inside the elevator, and glowering as he took his place at one side. Jordan lowered his face to hide a smile. Mr. Hill was always the protective papa bear to the boss, sometimes becoming a bit overbearing and forgetting that Nathaniel was not a child. But Jordan understood that it all came from a place of love, which he was sure the boss knew. That was why he always tolerated it. By the time they reached the foyer, Ethan was back with Jake and the others. Tom didn't allow Nathaniel and Dr. Hawthorne to go outside, and Andrew also disapproved of Nathaniel coming downstairs just to meet Blackwood. But when Jake and Alex ushered him in, Ethan saw Nathaniel waiting for him in the foyer and hurried over, carefully hugging him. Nathaniel patted him on the back, saying, "I'm so sorry, bro. I know how this must feel." Ethan nodded, feeling overwhelmed again. When he drew back, Arya hugged him too. "I'm sorry, Ethan," Arya said, her voice heavy with emotion. "Thank you, guys, but my God, Nate, what the hell are you doing coming down here? I'm not trying to lose you too. Ethan replied, his feelings obvious. Well, thank God someone gets it, Tom interjected. Arya looked down, fighting back a laugh despite the situation. I'm going back up, Tom, Nathaniel snapped over his shoulder, then turned to Ethan. You okay? Ethan nodded with a sigh. I feel gutted, he rasped. I know what that feels like. But please know you have us, and anything you need is yours, brother, Nathaniel replied. Tom hovered until Nathaniel and Dr. Hawthorne turned around to head back upstairs. Once they were back inside the makeshift theatre, and Arya hooked Nathaniel back up to the monitors, Nathaniel asked, What's the plan? Where do we pick her up? Ethan patted his suit pocket and cursed under his breath. What's wrong? Alex asked, concern etching his features. My phone. I left it with Isla Devereaux, he replied with a sigh. Nathaniel immediately saw an opportunity in that response and grinned to himself. No worries. She'll bring it over, he replied. Careful not to meet Alex's or Anna's gaze. She spoke with the officer who called. She knows more than I do. I am. Damn it, this isn't happening, Ethan muttered. Come. Arya said gently, taking Ethan by the forearm to guide him to a nearby chair. Sit down and let us handle it. Do you need anything? She asked, her voice low and soothing. A memory wipe. I need this to be a terrible dream, Ethan replied. It's okay, Ethan, Anna said as she joined Arya. The two women wrapped their arms around his neck, pulling him into a comforting hug. Ethan unconsciously placed a hand on Arya's back. Nathaniel, who had been texting Andrew to bring Isla Devereaux from the office to the house, looked up, his gaze locked onto Ethan's hand resting on Arya's back. Though Ethan was holding Anna in the same way, it didn't matter to Nathaniel. Okay. You know I love you, right, Ethan? You're like a brother to me, Nathaniel said, his voice laced with mock seriousness. But I swear to God, if you don't take your hand off my woman this instant, I'll break every single bone in your damn body, grieving or not, Ethan responded with a burst of laughter despite his mood. Alex joined in, laughing, remembering he'd received the same threat at some point during their friendship. Anna giggled while Arya looked mortified. Spotting a throw pillow nearby, she picked it up and marched toward Nathaniel with mock menace. Now, babe, let's not overreact, Nathaniel said, feigning fear. Remember, I just had surgery. You, of all people, should know better since you're my doctor. Arya tried not to laugh at the exaggerated expression of terror on his face. She angled the pillow and smacked him with it across the face. Grow up, Nathan. Quit being immature, she jeered. Well, according to science, men don't fully mature until around 45, so don't blame me. It's biology, my love, he quipped with a grin. Arya fought to keep a straight face as she hit him again, drawing laughter from everyone in the room. Ethan shook his head, wiping away the tears in his eyes. He realized how much he needed this, to be surrounded by friends, pulling him out of his grief with humor. He knew that if he were alone, it would consume him entirely. You guys are the best, you know that, Ethan found himself saying. Alex gasped theatrically. Did I just hear Ethan Blackwood say something nice? Anna exclaimed in mock horror. Arya bent over, laughing. Nathaniel narrowed his gaze theatrically and said, Okay, Arya, I think Ethan needs a brain scan. He's been taken over by an alien. Alex nodded. Exactly. Hey, dude, who are you and what have you done with Ethan? He demanded with exaggerated seriousness. Arya and Anna's laughter filled the room. Like I told Jake earlier, give it time, Ethan replied with a sheepish smile. Meanwhile, Jake, finally finding some time to himself, decided it was time to check Christine's incessant messages and voice calls. He left the Hawthorne building, opting for a walk despite the 17-degree temperature and the snow piling up. He didn't mind. Wrapped snugly in a heated winter jacket, he made his way to the garden and into the maze. The sounds of laughter from the kitchen echoed across the grounds, blending with the gentle howling of the wind as it swept across his face. He pulled up his hood, covering the military-style haircut he still maintained, and strolled deeper into the maze, the scent of flowers and the cold air filling his nostrils. Soon he reached the center of the flower maze, where a massive dragon fountain stood, its menacing jaw wide open, frozen water spilling from its mouth into the equally frozen basin below. Jake thought it was beautiful, a sheer work of art sculpted by nature itself. He took a seat on a corner bench, pulling out his flask and taking a sip to ward off the cold. Holding the flask in one hand, he used the other to retrieve his phone. With a flick of his thumb across the screen, he opened Christine's chat messages and began playing her voice messages. "Jake, please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Please forgive me. I don't want to lose you." The first message played, her voice thick with anguish. Jake shut his eyes briefly and took another swig of his drink. After that one ended, he played another, then another. They were all the same. She was sorry. She didn't want to lose him. Jake listened as he scrolled through the messages, his eyes tracing the words. Then it reached a point where she seemed to stop pleading. He noticed a shift in her tone, a tinge of frustration and pride. She began analyzing what had happened, subtly implying that he shared some of the blame. After all, he had asked her to marry him. Jake smiled bitterly. He supposed if you waited long enough, the mask of deceit would always crack. The last few messages revealed more. One was about the police arresting her and asking him to come to get her. Another was her expressing disappointment, accusing him of being bitter enough to ignore her, even when she needed him. She reminded him once again that she was his wife. The final message was a threat. She told him to accept her grandfather's deal, or she would tell Nathaniel everything. Jake chuckled softly and took another long drink. After he was done listening to all the messages, he dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring. The familiar hum of distant traffic in the background alerted Jake that she was no longer at his place but back at her apartment. Good, he thought, one problem solved. "Hello?" she said into the phone, her voice both hesitant and cold. "Hello, Christine." Jake sighed as he took another sip from his drink. "I've been trying to reach you. You just cut me off," she said, her tone low, laced with accusation. "Yeah, well, it seemed like there wasn't much left to say," he replied, his voice emotionless. "So you're not going to forgive me? Not even this one time, Jake?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. There was a short pause before Jake responded. "I think I made a mistake, Christine." His voice was gruff and regretful. "And to be honest, it's probably because I don't really know what being in love feels like. We were friends, even great lovers, and I thought that was enough," Jake said, staring unseeingly into space as Evangeline's smiling face flashed in his mind, his heart aching at the memory. "Every day I see how much Dr. Hawthorne loves her husband. Everyone knows she'd do anything for him. It makes sense to be a little envious, you know, to want that for yourself," he mused aloud with a bittersweet smile tugging at his lips as he paused to take another sip of his drink. "So this is still about me not agreeing to carry your ex-lover's baby," Christine cut in, anger rising in her voice. "No, this is about me confusing friendship and great sex for love," Jake said plainly. "How can you say that to me, Jake?" Christine asked, her voice filled with hurt. "I'm sorry, you know me. I'm always direct. It doesn't always help, I know. But what I'm trying to say is that we should have stayed friends or kept things casual. We shouldn't have complicated it with marriage. You've got what you wanted, though. The inheritance. I'll still move forward with the business deal with your grandfather, but he'll have to agree to my terms," Jake said. But Christine interrupted him. "He wants you to agree to his terms, Jake. He's not going to back down," she said sharply. "Don't worry, I'll take care of that," Jake replied, his voice steady and confident. "So what's next? Are you going to divorce me?" Christine asked with a shaky laugh. "I believe the word you're looking for is annulment," Christine, Jake corrected. "We had a prior agreement after all. I was supposed to pretend to marry you so you could get your inheritance," he stated flatly. "I want you, Jake," she whispered fervently. "Unfortunately, darling, I'm a human being," he quipped with dark humor. "And if I fight it?" she challenged him. "I know you're close to Nate, so maybe I don't have much of a chance. But that doesn't mean I won't try," she snapped. "You can try, Christine. But if you do, my offer of friendship will be off the table," Jake said calmly. "Jake, please," she whispered, her tone soft and pleading. "I'm sorry, Christine, but I deserve to be loved. It's not fair for you to ask me to settle. I deserve love too," he said. "I love you," came her reply. "No, you don't. I'll keep you updated on whatever I discuss with your grandfather. Take care now," Jake replied before ending the call. He then placed the phone on the bench beside him. The silence settled on him like a blanket. His thoughts drifted back to his childhood, the familiar ache settling in his chest at the memory of nothing but despair. He couldn't claim he was hard to love, which was why his father hated him. Nathaniel, Andrew, and the other men seemed to care about him deeply. He couldn't say he was cursed in the eyes of women either. The women on the estate showed him kindness as well, so perhaps he simply had terrible luck in choosing partners because he was damaged mentally and emotionally. Maybe that was why he always found himself drawn to broken women, because he was broken too. How does one love when they have never truly experienced it? How does a broken soul learn to love another? He took another sip of his drink, then another, and kept drinking. His phone rang, the shrill sound disturbing the peaceful atmosphere. Jake glanced at the screen and saw it was one of the captain's boys, probably calling with information about Dr. Hart's stalker. He pressed receive and switched to speaker mode. That was the longest wait ever, Jake said, his voice slightly slurred. You're lucky we're even entertaining this at all, Darfield. Luke Greetham is not allowed visitors for now, so you must appreciate the amount of strings we had to pull, came the response. Jake chuckled. Fine, thanks, Kiev, he replied. Well, thank you, Darfield. Look at you being civil, he said, and Jake laughed. Idiot, he muttered. I heard that. It's just like you to ruin a perfectly historic moment, he retorted. Then added, the appointment is set for first thing in the morning. Remember, Jake, it's just talk, that's all, Kiev implored. Sure, Jake replied. Thanks, man, he added before ending the call. Really? An angry feminine voice pierced the air. Jake snapped his gaze in the direction of the sound and saw it was Dr. Evangeline Hart. What are you doing here? Jake growled, immediately angry that she must have heard his conversation, especially the one with Christine. How long have you been here? He demanded, getting up and feeling a tad unsteady on his feet. Are you for real? Are you seriously questioning me right now, Mr. Darfield? I know you don't like me and thought I was lying about Luke Greetham, but don't you think you're taking this too far by wanting to go see him just to corroborate my story? Don't you realize that would expose my whereabouts and put everyone here in danger? You're the one who's concerned about me being a threat and you want to stir up hell for me? What exactly have I done to you? She screamed at him, tears blurring her vision from the sheer force of the pain welling inside her. She had finally found peace for the past few days, and now he was going to ruin that just because he didn't like her. Jake didn't know how he managed to cross the grounds to her, but he found himself glowering at her the next minute. You know, perhaps if you didn't lurk around where you're not wanted, you wouldn't hear something that had nothing to do with you, Jake growled. Are you serious? Are you telling me I heard wrong? Tell me exactly what connection you have with Luke Greetham, Mr. Darfield. Tell me it isn't about me. Go on, lie to my damn face, she cried. I said it had nothing to do with you, Jake repeated through gritted teeth. You are such a liar, she bellowed, emotions spilling over, and without giving him a chance to explain, she turned to leave. He grabbed her by the forearm and jerked her back to him. She gasped, fear evident in her tone, and although the garden lights cast only a soft glow, Jake saw the flash of terror on her face. I can never hurt you, he said, his voice gruff and impassioned. Evangeline let out a shaky breath, her eyes dark and haunted. Jake wrapped one arm around her to lift her up, while his other hand cupped the back of her neck, ensuring she could look into his eyes. I'll never hurt you, he repeated. When her shoulders shook as she started to cry, he took her lips. An overwhelming wave of emotion coursed through him like a jolt of electricity, causing him to tremble violently. Christ help me, he groaned against her lips. Jake thought the last time he had felt such overwhelming helplessness was when he was 12. Although the circumstances were different and the emotions varied, the sense of being out of control and powerless remained the same. Back then, the situation had only enraged him. Now, however, he was conflicted. One part of him was disgusted by his helplessness, while another part, the one that seemed to be dominating, was in pure elation. Eva's lips were soft and full, and her body pressed against him felt warm and supple, enveloping his hard length. Her heat seeped into him like a welcome furnace, filling him with a deep, satisfying pleasure he never wanted to release. It was a blessing that she was kissing him back. Her hands framed his face as she returned his fervent kiss. It was both crushing and exhilarating to realize he had been right to keep his distance from her. It felt like he was giving her his very soul, and he didn't know how to feel about that. Jake shifted on his feet, unintentionally pressing her back against the flower hedge that lined the pathway. "Cold," she moaned in protest. Jake pulled back, stumbling towards the bench while still cradling her in his arms. He was pretty sure they had both lost their minds. When he grabbed the hem of her jacket and tugged, fabric tearing and buttons scattering in his desperate need for her, she didn't stop him. She cried out his name, igniting a wild, untamed need within him. He buried his face in her chest, overwhelmed by the moment. The shrill ring of his phone cut through the intensity like an earth-shattering quake. Evangeline froze, and it took Jake a moment to halt his actions. He lifted his face to meet hers, both of their chests rising and falling with each ragged breath. "Ava," he began, unsure of what he was supposed to say, but damn it, he didn't want to stop. He didn't want to let her go. It frustrated him even more that he couldn't trust his own emotions. Evangeline, however, was utterly mortified by what she had let happen. What madness was this? She had been insanely angry with him, and yet she was going to let him have her, on a garden bench, in the snow? The phone stopped ringing for a moment, only to start again. Evangeline slipped off Jake's lap as reality crept back in. "Damn it!" Jake growled as he grabbed the phone. "What?" he yelled. "Mr. Darfield? Is this a bad time?" a male voice asked on the other end. Jake had no idea who it was. Maybe. "Who is this?" he rasped, furrowing his brows as he lifted his eyes to see Evangeline hurrying away. He briefly put the phone on hold. "Eva! Hell, woman, wait!" he growled. She ignored him and quickened her pace instead. Jake wanted to run after her to stop her, but figured the phone call must be important. Dr. Hart wasn't going anywhere, he thought. He'd catch up with her later. "I'm Collins Mario, Mr. Powell's attorney. I believe we met when we visited you at your house," the voice said. "Oh, okay," Jake replied, though he still had no idea which of Powell's men he was. "I believe we have a pending business arrangement to conclude. Are you, ready to accept my client's terms?" Collins asked. "I believe that's my line, Mr. Mario. If you send me your email address, I'll have a soft copy of my terms sent over. Once we reach an agreement, my lawyer will arrange a meeting," Jake said as he bent down to retrieve his flask from the snow-dusted ground. His eyes landed on a dark round shape, a button, against the white powder. Then he saw another and another. A small, incredulous smile tugged at his lips as he began picking them up and slipping them into his pocket. "Mr. Darfield, I was under the impression you'd already agreed to the terms." "That's why the money was delivered to your house," the lawyer replied. "If I remember correctly, I left during that meeting. And if any money changed hands, it must have been Mr. Powell giving it to his granddaughter. Christine might be my wife legally, but she's still a Powell," Jake said with a smug tone, mentally thanking Mr. Hill for his foresight. I'll need to speak with my client and get back to you," the lawyer stammered. "Great. Be sure to send your email and physical address for the hard copy delivery." "Tom Hill is a busy man. I wouldn't want to waste his time with a deal that's going nowhere," Jake added smoothly. There was a brief silence before the lawyer hesitantly asked, "Tom Hill? As in, the Hawthorne lawyer, Mr. Hill?" "The one and only," Jake replied. Another pause followed before the man said, "All right. I'll speak with my client and send you the contact information." While Jake was finishing his call and striding toward the house, Evangeline hurried down the hallway toward the nursery. Noria had taken over earlier, allowing her to step out for a walk and a change of scenery. Her path had led to the flower maze, and she had thought she was lost until she heard Jake Darfield's voice. Heat spread across her cheeks and neck as she recalled what happened afterward. She was certain Jake would now think not only that she was a danger to baby Eli, but that she had loose morals. How in the world did that happen, she thought, her heart pounding. Entering the nursery, she knew it would be easy to slip into her room and back out without Noria noticing, especially with the way the chair was positioned. All she had to do was be very careful. A short while later, carrying her duffel bag, she quietly made her way out of the room and into the hallway. Opting for the stairs instead of the elevator, she found her way down the building and slipped out through the back door. Tears blurred her vision, and her heart ached at the thought of leaving Eli after promising she would stay until he was delivered. Her breath trembled as she cried softly. None of the guards she passed stopped her. She simply waved and kept her gaze lowered, finding her way down the driveway toward the road that led to the estate gate. She silently hoped they would clear her to leave quickly when she arrived. Dr. Williams had told her she was free to go whenever she felt she couldn't stay, and that the estate wasn't her prison. She just hoped they wouldn't make her explain herself. Fearing Jake might catch up to her before she reached the gate, she broke into a run. Jake took the elevator to the 3rd floor, striding down the hallway toward the nursery. He was just about to reach the door when his phone rang. Cursing under his breath, he saw it was the estate security line and reluctantly answered. "Hello," he said, a bit more forcefully than intended. "Well, hello to you too, Jake. Care to explain why your babysitter is walking toward the estate gate in the cold?" Adam's voice came through. "Son of a..." Jake muttered a string of expletives before saying, "I'll handle it," and abruptly ended the call. He spun on his heel and rushed back to the elevator, heading down to the ground floor. Bursting out of the foyer a moment later, he cursed again when he saw 3 SUVs blocking his car. Without hesitation, he took off running down the driveway and onto the road leading to the estate gate. For someone accustomed to exercising in challenging terrain, it wasn't much of a challenge. Soon he spotted a dark figure up ahead. He quickened his pace. Evangeline couldn't believe how long it was taking to reach the gate, grumbling under her breath about the sheer size of the estate. Just then, she heard the crunch of snow behind her and turned, her heart skipping a beat when she saw Jake Darfield. She growled in annoyance and tried to pick up her pace. Jake might have laughed if the situation weren't so serious. Catching up to her, he slowed down beside her and said, "I didn't peg you for a runner." "I didn't peg you for a liar," she shot back. "What you overheard has nothing to do with you. It would be in your best interest to forget it," Jake replied evenly. "Oh, so you're not here to explain why you were planning to meet Luke, greet him, and expose my location?" she retorted. "I can't discuss that with you," Jake said simply. "Very well then," she replied coldly and kept walking. "You weren't supposed to hear that," Jake muttered, more to himself than to her. Evangeline said nothing and continued forward. "And I'm pretty sure your decision to leave has more to do with us kissing than anything about Luke Greetham," Jake prodded, hoping to get a reaction. She remained silent. "So you're abandoning my son just because we kissed?" he added, pushing harder. She stopped, breathing hard, and turned to face him. Her eyes were clouded with pain, and Jake could see dried streaks of tears on her face. "I'm not abandoning Eli," she cried with ardent emotion, and then, as if realizing what she'd just said, her eyes widened in horror. She quickly looked away. "I mean baby Darfield. The last thing I want is to put him in danger," she added, her voice trembling as fresh tears began to fall. Jake's gaze lingered on the raw emotion on her young face. "I shouldn't get attached. He is just so adorable, you know." She sobbed, seemingly helpless. "I know," Jake responded huskily, silently taking in her raw emotions. "I was going to leave in a couple of months anyway," she sobbed, crying even harder. Jake thought she looked heartbreakingly adorable. "I may not understand much about female emotions," he began gently, "but I can tell you care about people and you care about my son. If I promise never to kiss you again, will you come back and not put yourself in danger by going out there?" he asked. Evangeline felt a fresh wave of mortification wash over her. She couldn't even look at him. "I'm sorry. I should probably just go home. Staying here isn't a good idea," she replied, turning to walk again. "So there's nothing I can say to make you stay?" Jake called after her. She didn't respond. "Fine then," Jake muttered, and without warning grabbed her by the forearm, hoisting her over his shoulder in one swift motion. Evangeline was too shocked to react at first. "What are you doing?" "Put me down," she shouted, pounding her fists against his back. "I have stitches back there from getting blown up, but no worries, keep hitting me," he said with dark humor. She gasped, her hands freezing mid-air, and then, as if doubting his words, she lifted his shirt slightly. Jake knew the scar was what made her gasp next. "You don't have stitches," she pointed out. I know, Jake replied with a smirk. You were really in an explosion? She asked in a small voice. Yes, Mom, he replied. Does it still hurt? She probed, her concern evident. If you're asking just so you can hit me, I'm going to have to decline to answer that question, Dr. Hart, Jake replied. Evangeline let out a sigh. For some reason, she didn't like him calling her Dr. Hart, especially after she had heard how lovely her first name sounded when he used it. Can you please put me down? This is very undignified, she muttered, mortified all over again. Will you head back inside, or are you still planning to leave? Jake probed. Fine, I'll return. Put me down, Mr. Darfield, she said firmly. Jake hesitated, enjoying the feel of her against him a little too much, but after a moment, he relented, slowly lowering her to the ground. As he did, her body brushed against his, and he held her gaze for a lingering moment. As soon as her feet touched the snow-covered ground, she stepped back, creating a considerable distance between them. Let me help you with that, Jake offered, extending his hand for her to pass over her duffel bag. I can carry my own bag, Mr. Darfield, thank you, came her reply. Are you always this hard-headed? He teased. She glared at him and continued on her way, trying to avoid walking too close to him. As she navigated through the snow with her bag, she soon missed her step and tripped. Jake caught her before she could fall, lifting her along with her bag in a bridle carry without a word and without meeting her gaze. I wasn't really going to fall, she remarked. Yes, Dr. Hart, Jake rasped, keeping his tone indifferent, as if this were a mission and she were a civilian he needed to help to safety. Evangeline noticed his sudden withdrawal, and her heart constricted as she looked up into his face, silently taking in his profile. Her eyes settled on his lips, and she allowed herself to dwell on just how terrifying what had happened between them was. It was clear he had an influence over her that was beyond her control. Jake could feel her eyes on him, and although he fought hard not to lower his gaze to hers, he eventually did, his eyes meeting her intense scrutiny. He didn't look away until she did, his hold on her tightening. Evangeline held her body stiffly in his arms as he navigated the snowy terrain, but when they reached a certain point, she let out a sigh, accepting that he didn't intend to put her down. She relaxed against him, and Jake inhaled the whiff of flowery scent in her hair, reveling in it along with the warmth of her against his body. Soon enough, they arrived back at the front porch of the house, and he gently set her down. Have a good evening, Dr. Hart, Jake said, walking away and deliberately rounding the building to go through the back and into the kitchen. Upon reaching the kitchen, he saw Andrew there with Charles and Aidan. You okay, man? Andrew asked. I'm perfect, Jake replied, as he settled at the table next to Aidan, missing the knowing looks shared among the three. Are you sure? Why do you look all flushed? Charles asked. I took a walk, came his reply. In the snow? Andrew responded incredulously. Yeah, in the snow, he replied. I have news about Powell. I think he's going to bite. Desperation is a pain in the ass, he quipped. So you spoke with Christine? Aidan probed, giving Jake a searching gaze. Yes, Jake replied. How did that go? Miss Jonas asked with interest. Jake chuckled and looked around, noting the concerned expressions on everyone's faces. See, I promise I'm fine. Christine is the least of my problems right now, he said, darting his eyes from Andrew to Charles, then to Aidan, and finally to Miss Jonas. That's good to know, Miss Jonas replied, with a secretive smile before placing a cup of eggnog in front of Jake and adding, Isn't it a great season to fall in love? Jake narrowed his gaze at the older woman. Isla Devereaux couldn't fathom why Hawthorne's security team couldn't just take Ethan Blackwood's phone from her and deliver it themselves. Instead, they made her come all the way to the Hawthorne estate. Not that she was complaining. She had to admit there was a flicker of eagerness in her at the thought of seeing Ethan Blackwood again, though she refused to dwell on the reason why. She'd like to think it was because he was distraught and that she wanted to offer her support, just as she had done at the office earlier that day. Any other reason was mentally stomped into non-existence. She was certain that whatever reason might surface, other than the logical one, was all in her imagination, likely fueled by the surprise of seeing Blackwood's sensitive side. Her heart constricted at the thought of losing a mother. She couldn't imagine how unbearably agonizing that would be. She thought of her own mother, who had been both a friend and parent to her for as long as she could remember, especially after losing her father at a young age. The very thought of losing her mother made Isla clutch her purse in an attempt to resist the impulse to shoot her a quick phone call just to hear her voice. She looked outside the car, allowing her eyes to drift over the well-groomed compound of her boss. A spark of excitement shot through her at the thought of being admitted into Nathaniel Hawthorne's home. Nathaniel Hawthorne was a notoriously private man. Despite his approachable demeanor, there was something about him that made it impossible to treat him like a regular boss. His mere presence commanded respect and authority. Nathaniel was known not only for his brilliance, but also for his adventurousness when it came to invention. He was awe-inspiring, the kind of person anyone would be lucky to have as a mentor. Isla had been both shocked and terrified when she applied for the position of head of chemical engineering and industrial chemistry, and he had walked into her interview unannounced. The entire room had stood up as if royalty had entered. At that moment, Isla had been certain she would fumble under his gaze. And she had, especially when he asked her a question that seemed to cut through the air like a blade. What do you consider the most significant challenge in industrial chemistry today? And how would you address it if you were responsible for leading a global team of researchers and engineers? Nathaniel's sharp eyes had locked onto hers. Isla's heart had pounded in her chest. Her mind went blank for a split second as everyone in the room seemed to be holding their breath. She struggled to find the words. Well, I suppose the most significant challenge would be the need for sustainable practices in manufacturing, balancing productivity with minimal environmental impact, and the continuous innovation required to... Stop. Nathaniel's voice cut her off, though not unkindly. He had a way of commanding attention without raising his voice. Isla froze, mortified. Had she blown it already? Take a deep breath, he said, his tone calm but firm. Now start again, but this time, give me the answer you would give if this was your only chance. Because it is. His eyes hadn't wavered, and neither had the intensity in the room. Everyone was still watching, waiting. This was it, the moment that would define her future at the company. She took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying herself before speaking again. Afterward, Isla couldn't decide which had been more terrifying, Nathaniel walking in during her interview, or the curt nod he gave the head of human resources without saying a word to her before leaving. Isla had been utterly shaken. We'll get back to you, Miss Devereaux, the head of HR had said, after a slight pause that felt like a ticking bomb. Isla had fought the urge to ask if that was all, then stood and left. Her previous job had been solid, but she hadn't felt as though she was being given the chance to grow. Farmer Hawthorne, however, was renowned not only for grooming its employees to become inventors, but also for offering a work environment famous for its job security and wealth generation. People in the industry joked that if a mob came for Nathaniel Hawthorne, they'd have to go through his employees first. He was that strategic about maintaining his workforce, treating everyone like they mattered. Isla had nearly slipped into depression at the thought of being rejected by Farmer Hawthorne, believing it would make her feel like a failure. For a whole week, she heard nothing, her nerves and anxieties skyrocketing, until she received an email from HR with an employment offer attached. The message prompted her to accept or reject the offer. She had laughed hysterically at the idea that anyone in their right mind would ever click reject. It wasn't a huge surprise when she later discovered that Nathaniel Hawthorne was friends with Ethan Blackwood and Alexander Sterndale. She was certain her boss surrounded himself with brilliant people and must be some kind of sapiosexual, especially given his marriage to the renowned and brilliant Dr. Ariana Everly. Her excitement grew at the prospect of meeting her in person. The Jeep came to a stop in front of a massive mansion built from brown stone, glass, and brick. Isla thought it was breathtaking, but before she could fully take it in, a tall, muscular man opened the door for her. She couldn't help but wonder how the Hawthornes always managed to have such ruggedly handsome bodyguards. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't recall ever seeing an unattractive one. It seemed as though being tall, fit, and distractingly good-looking was a requirement for the job. She wondered if that was part of their overall strategy. "Welcome, Miss Devereux," the guard in the black suit said. "Thank you, good evening," she responded politely. "I'm here to drop off Mr. Blackwood's phone," she added quickly, her nerves betraying her. "Yes, I know," he replied with a hint of amusement. Isla mentally facepalmed, thinking, of course he knows. He probably even knows what I had for breakfast, lunch, and that I haven't had dinner yet. She figured they must have gathered all the necessary details before allowing her onto the estate. "I'm Jordan. If you'll follow me, please," he said, leading Miss Devereux inside. As they stepped into the foyer, Isla spotted two identical boys darting across the expansive space. The moment they saw her and Jordan, they froze. Dressed in pajamas, the boys looked strikingly like Nathaniel Hawthorne, and Isla instantly assumed they were her boss's twin sons. "They're absolutely adorable," she thought. "Hello, you must be Liam and Owen Hawthorne. I'm Isla Devereux." "I work with your dad," Isla greeted them warmly, offering them a bright smile. Both boys hesitantly waved back, flashing wide, exaggerated smiles. "Welcome, Miss Devereux," they chorused. "Aren't you two supposed to be in your rooms?" Jordan asked, raising an eyebrow, clearly suspicious of whatever mischief they were planning. "Yes, Uncle Jordan, but we're headed to the kitchen to talk to Miss Jonas about something very important," Liam said, raising a finger for emphasis. "Pie. We're going to get pie," Owen added bluntly, causing Liam to shoot him a glare. "You don't just blurt out pie in front of the lady," Liam scolded. "Oh, it's fine," Isla replied with a grin. "I'm a late-night fridge raider myself." The boys seemed quick and clever, and Isla couldn't stop smiling at them. "A late-night fridge raider?" Owen repeated with a frown. "That doesn't sound very healthy," Isla laughed. "No, it's not," she admitted. "So you make bad choices even though you know they're unhealthy," Liam quipped. "I think I like you, Miss Devereux." Isla laughed, and Jordan shook his head, chuckling. At that moment, the elevator chimed, and the boys exchanged knowing glances before exclaiming, "Uh-oh!" and dashing toward a hallway on the right. "Have a nice evening, miss," they called in unison as they ran off. Isla smiled just as a woman stepped out of the elevator. Jordan led Isla toward a door on the opposite side of the entrance, while the woman gave her a polite smile and a nod. "Good evening," Isla greeted quickly. "Good evening," the woman replied. "Jordan, have you seen my little jailbirds?" Anita quipped. "Kitchen," Jordan answered briefly. Isla chuckled at the exchange, realizing the boys were likely quite a handful. Before long, Isla realized that Jordan had led her to the back porch, a stunningly beautiful and elegant setting, one of the finest she had ever seen. But, given that her boss was a billionaire, it wasn't surprising. At the center of the space was an electric fire pit, surrounded by a uniquely designed dragon-shaped outdoor couch. Ethan Blackwood sat in a corner, accompanied by Alex Sterndale and the woman who had come with Alex earlier to pick up Blackwood. At first, Isla hadn't known who the woman was, though she had been curious about her connection to Ethan, especially since they seemed so naturally affectionate. Ivy had later clarified that the woman was Anna Morris. Isla was surprised she hadn't recognized her, considering the Morris family were famous, wealthy hoteliers from New York. Anna had also attended Harvard, which made sense of the close bond she seemed to share with Ethan and Alex. Relief swept over Isla when she noticed Anna's affection was directed toward Alex, not Ethan. Her gaze then shifted to the engagement ring on Anna's finger. Something she hadn't noticed before, and a quiet sigh escaped her. Not that it meant anything, she reminded herself. She also noted that neither her boss nor his wife were present. "Mr. Blackwood," Jordan called, drawing Ethan's attention. When Ethan's eyes landed on Isla, his expression darkened with confusion, wondering why she was there. Then it clicked. Nate had mentioned she'd be bringing his phone. He exhaled, rubbing his face with one hand before running his fingers through his hair. He wasn't in the right mental state to be around Isla Devereux, who was far too tempting. It felt like a terrible idea to have her near him, especially when his defenses were completely down. Ethan motioned for Jordan to come closer, and Jordan gestured for Isla to follow. Isla's heart went out to Ethan. He looked exhausted, his eyes swollen from strain, yet even in this state, she couldn't deny how incredibly attractive he still was. Or maybe, she thought with a wry smile, she was losing her mind. "Good evening, Miss Devereux," Alex said, standing up as Isla joined them. He quickly introduced Anna Morris as his fiancée. Isla smiled, nodding and exchanging pleasantries with the couple. She noticed Ethan hadn't stood up, and when she glanced his way, she found his hooded eyes locked on her. A subtle flicker of excitement rose in her chest, making her pulse race. Ethan wordlessly gestured to the seat beside him, and she quietly sat down next to him. "Thanks for bringing my phone. But you could have just left it at the gate," Ethan remarked. Isla couldn't quite tell if he was teasing her or subtly brushing her off. Before she could respond, he added in a quiet voice, "Thanks for today." His tone was soft, almost a whisper, but she heard him clearly. "You're welcome," she said, meeting his sidelong glance as their eyes briefly locked. "Miss Devereux," Anna began, quietly observing the unspoken tension between Ethan and Isla. Normally so acerbic, Ethan appeared unexpectedly restrained, almost courteous. She figured his recent grief might have softened him. Perhaps if he remained this way, the Devereux woman might stick around. "Please call me Isla," she quickly interjected, returning Anna's smile with a polite nod. "Ethan mentioned you were the one who took down the details about where to pick up Mrs. Blackwood. Could you share that information so we can make arrangements to bring her home?" Anna asked, her tone soft yet serious. "Of course," Isla replied, pulling out the notepad where she'd written everything down. It made sense now why she had been asked to come. She was the one who had recorded the details for arranging the return of Ethan's mother's body from Paris. As she leaned over to hand the notepad to Anna, it struck her that once she gave them the information and returned Ethan's phone, she would have no reason to stay. The realization that Ethan might soon leave for the East, and that this could be the last time she would be seeing him, gnawed at her. Without fully considering her words, she blurted out, "I can help with the arrangements. I could even go over there to bring her back. I'm fluent in French and 4 other languages." She paused, letting out a light, awkward laugh before adding, "I suppose that could come in handy, given the circumstances," her voice trailing off. "Come on, Isla," she silently admonished herself. "That's very kind of you. We wouldn't mind that at all. In fact, we were just discussing not letting Ethan go alone. Perhaps you could go with him." Alex chimed in, his tone overly friendly. Ethan shot him a raised eyebrow, recognizing the thinly veiled amusement in his voice. It was obvious Alex was trying not to laugh at Isla's eagerness, and Ethan found it telling that she would offer to go when she had other responsibilities. "That's my decision, I believe," Ethan interjected, giving Alex a pointed look before turning to Isla. "If you'll excuse us, I think Miss Devereux and I need to have a word." He stood, took Isla by the wrist, and guided her away from the terrace and back into the house. Without pausing, he led her up the stairs, down a corridor, and into an opulently decorated bedroom. Ethan pulled her inside, slammed the door shut, and faced her, making her back up until she was pressed against the wall. Leaning closer, he placed one hand against the door above her head. "What's going on with you?" he asked, his sharp gaze locking onto hers with intensity. Isla Devereux felt as if her brain had just been scrambled with Ethan so close, their faces separated by only a hairbreadth. His cologne carried a subtle spicy tinge, a mix of cinnamon, amber, and sandalwood. The warm, enticing scent made her want to get closer, to bury her nose in the nook of his neck. "Isla," Ethan called softly. She blinked, her lashes fluttering as she forced herself to focus, her pulse racing at the sound of her first name on his lips. Focus, Isla, he's your boss's friend. Don't mess up now." She mentally coached herself. Why didn't I just shut my mouth? I don't even like him, right? The last word hung in her mind, tinged with doubt. Why does he seem so irresistible? My God, she continued to agonize internally. I was just trying to help, sir. I thought you needed help, she finally stuttered, her eyes searching his face. Ethan frowned, sensing something off in her simple response. It didn't sit right with him, like a nagging suspicion. Then it hit him. The project. He remembered her disappointment when he had chosen just one of her department's proposals. Perhaps she thought she could sway his decision by being a sycophant. Anger so profound kindled in him. Look at me, Ethan snapped. Do I look stupid, Isla? Are you hoping to influence my decision about your department's project? Is that why you're being so nice to me? His voice held a growl of annoyance. What? Isla gasped, utterly shocked. Are you trying to take advantage of my grief, woman? Ethan snarled, his anger rising. Isla couldn't believe her ears. Fury surged within her, and without thinking, she shoved him backward, her hands pushing against his chest. His eyes darkened with anger. You've got some nerve, you know that? Oh my God, I thought. No, I hoped I had misunderstood you, that I had misjudged you. But no, you are exactly what I thought you were. Arrogant, conceited, self-centered, a jackass. Isla jabbed him in the chest with every word. She was too furious to remember who he was, too angry to care that he could get her fired. If that's not the case, then why were you so keen on me choosing more than one project from your presentation, Miss Devereaux? Ethan retorted, his anger cooling as he watched her fiery response. He realized he preferred this version of her, the one that wasn't trying to kiss his behind. I was persistent because I saw the effort my team put into those projects. They wanted all 3 accepted, and you picked just one. It broke my heart to have to go back and tell them, but I did. We accepted it and are already working on delivering what you asked for, and you dare accuse me of deceit? You, sir, are vile. She growled. I take it back. I don't want to waste any more time trying to help a jerk like you, someone who clearly doesn't deserve it. With that, she wheeled around and stormed toward the door. Ethan grabbed her by the forearm, pulling her back toward him, holding her close with a firm grip as his eyes locked onto hers. Let go of me, Mr. Blackwood. Isla snapped, her voice sharp, her teeth bared in almost a snarl. That was quite the performance, but I still need an answer, Miss Devereaux. Go on, tell me, he demanded, though this time his anger had shifted into something raw and intense, making Isla swallow hard. She tried to wrench free from his hold, but he didn't release her. She moved back, and he followed until her back pressed against the door. Just give me an answer, Isla, and you can leave, Ethan persisted, his voice deep and gruff. I already did. Isla shot back, her pulse racing, her heart hammering as if it might burst. Liar, Ethan murmured, his face lowering towards hers, hovering just inches away. He studied the emotions flickering in her eyes, enthralling him. What do you want me to say, huh? Isla asked, her voice barely recognizable to herself. The truth, no bullshitting, Ethan demanded forcefully. I just wanted to help, that's all, but don't worry, I've already taken it back. She started to retort, but Ethan closed the space between their faces, capturing her lips in a fervent, searing kiss. Isla trembled as a wave of emotions surged through her, instinctively making her cling to him as he fed on her lips. He gently parted her lips and she allowed it, responding timidly at first, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. Yet, with each passing second, her hesitation faded, and her kisses grew bolder. For a moment there, Ethan almost forgot the reason behind the kiss. He had wanted to feel what it was like to surrender to the tension simmering between them, a desire that threatened to shatter his bachelorhood. She was everything he wanted, and yet everything he wasn't sure he was ready for. The kiss had only confirmed it. Breathing heavily, he forced himself to step back, turning away to hide the emotions swirling inside him. Lewis will take you home and pick you up at 6 a.m. Be on time, Miss Devereaux, he said, his voice strained. Isla's legs felt like they had turned to jelly, her whole body trembling as though she had been swept up in the craziest whirlwind ever. She couldn't find her voice. She simply opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Glancing down the corridor, she spotted one of the Hawthorne guards waiting for her. She took a deep breath, trying to pull herself together as she walked toward him, willing herself to stay steady. Minutes later, when the Hawthorne guard dropped her off in front of her apartment building and said, "I'll be here to pick you up in the morning, madam?" Isla had barely managed a nod. She walked in a daze toward the entrance, offering a distracted nod in response to the security guard's greeting. Once inside her apartment, she locked the door and leaned against it, slowly sliding down to the floor. Touching a finger to her lips, she whispered, "Wow," still feeling the lingering daze from the evening's turn of events. Later that night, Anton peered into the dining room and saw Mr. Hill having a private dinner with Miss Bella and Dawn. He had hoped to find a moment to speak with the older man about Dawn. With everything happening with the boss, Dawn hadn't been able to spend much time with him lately, and he missed her. He thought that if their relationship was out in the open, there would be no reason to sneak around anymore, and she could freely be with him without hiding. Deciding it was now or never, he moved toward the dining room, then hesitated, turning back to retrace his steps down the corridor. Reaching the end, he groaned and turned around again, heading back towards the dining room. He repeated this twice before finally reaching the threshold on his third attempt. Just then, Tom caught sight of him. Tightening his jaw, he flashed a smile at Bella and Dawn before pretending to receive a call. He then excused himself from the table and headed out. Anton froze when he saw Mr. Hill emerge shortly after. "Good evening, Mr. Hill," Anton greeted him, preparing to leave, but Tom stopped him. "It seems to me you have something on your mind, Anton. Perhaps it's time we got it out in the open," Tom said, his tone sharp and tinged with displeasure. Anton caught that tone of voice, and a sad smile tugged at his lips as it dawned on him that the older man was aware of his feelings for Dawn and didn't approve. Why would he? Anton's chest tightened with pain. Mr. Hill knew everything about every single Hawthorne bodyguard. It made sense that he wouldn't want someone carrying the weight of past trauma in his daughter's life. Anton understood that, but it didn't make the rejection any less painful. "No, sir, I don't think it's necessary anymore," he replied, and continued walking away. Tom followed him. "I have nothing personal against you, Anton. I know you're a good man, but you're still a hired gun. I want more for my daughter. After all she's been through, living without me in her life, I want her to have a stable home, not with a man who might make her a widow before long. Damn it, Anton, I'm talking to you." Tom snapped when Anton didn't stop. "There's no need to explain yourself, Mr. Hill," Anton said, pausing to look over his shoulder. "She's your daughter. You have every right to protect her," he added, then walked out of the foyer and through the exit. Tom felt terrible in the aftermath. He wondered if he had jumped the gun, but then again, if he had waited and let the two of them get more attached, wouldn't it have been too late by then? Still, he couldn't shake the image of Anton's slumped shoulders, the look of defeat in his posture, as if he had been expecting this all along, just waiting for a sign. "Damn it," Tom muttered, running a hand through his greying hair. When he turned around, Dawn was standing right there, tears welling in her eyes. "What have you done?" she whispered, her voice trembling with pain. "Dawn, honey," Tom began, but Dawn cut him off. "Why would you do that? Why would you take him from me, Dad?" she asked, her slight frame trembling with emotion. "I'm not a child, Dad." Her voice grew louder. "You can't use Anton to fix your screw-ups," she bellowed. "Now, young lady, mind your tone. I am your father." Tom snapped back. "And I'm 29 years old," she shot back, her voice quieter but still full of hurt. "Thank you, Dad, for taking the man I love from me." With that, she turned and ran up the stairs, her back stiff with emotion just as Bella came hurrying out. She glanced at Dawn disappearing up the stairs, then at Tom standing near the foyer door, his fists clenched at his sides. With a heavy sigh, she asked, "What did you do now, Tom?" her voice tinged with apprehension. Meanwhile, in the makeshift theatre room, Alex and Anna had joined Nathaniel and Arya. Alex was recounting how Ethan had been unusually gentlemanly when Isla Devereaux visited. "I suspected something was up yesterday, and today I got confirmation when I saw her," Alex said with amusement. "You should have seen his face when she said she volunteered to go with him to Paris." "Oh, I'm going to enjoy every minute of this trip," he added, making the others laugh. "Ah, now I get why Nathan was being secretive yesterday. He set Ethan up," Arya teased. "I did no such thing," Nathaniel lied. Though his guilty smile gave him away, Alex, Anna, and Arya burst into laughter. "Poor Ethan, he looked completely lost," Anna chimed in. "This is going to be fun to watch," Alex said, laughing. "I hate that I won't be able to go with you guys," Nathaniel said wistfully. "Me too," Arya added. "Don't worry, Anna and I will stand in for you two," Alex replied. "Thanks, man," Nathaniel said with a smile. Not long after, Ethan walked in, and the moment he entered, Nathaniel and Alex broke into laughter. "Ah, bloody gossips," Ethan retorted, causing his friends to laugh even harder. "I take it you already know Miss Devereaux will be joining us on the trip to Paris tomorrow," Ethan said, directing his question to Nathaniel. "Yes, I heard she volunteered," Nathaniel replied, emphasizing the word with a grin. Ethan couldn't help but laugh as he walked over to the side couch to grab a throw pillow. Arya, still laughing, rushed over to defend Nathaniel. "I love you, Ethan, but I swear, if you hurt my husband, I'm going to throttle you," she warned playfully, making Nathaniel shake with laughter. The next morning, Nathaniel woke up to Arya gently brushing her thumb against his eyebrows. Blinking the sleep away, his lips curved into a smile as his eyes met hers. The loving glow in her brown, translucent gems made his heart swell with warmth. "Good morning, my love," she whispered. "You know I'm still mad at you for making me lose 5 years of waking up like this, seeing your loving, tender smile and knowing you're mine," he quipped. "Oh, really?" Arya replied, playing along as she pressed a gentle kiss on his lips, then the tip of his nose, the corners of his mouth, and finally back to his lips, giving him a quick peck before pulling away. "Not fair." "I want more," Nathaniel murmured, his voice deepening, now edged with a hoarse tone. "And more you shall get, my darling. After you've had your morning exercise and gotten better," she teased. He chuckled. "That's just plain cruel, you know that," he replied, framing her jaw with his hand to pull her face closer. He kissed her his way, taking his time, not stopping until she melted into it, her eyes drifting shut, her breath quickening. "Nathan," she moaned into his mouth. Nathaniel grinned. "And that, my love, is what I call a sweet, sweet start to the day," he rasped, his voice low and barely audible. Arya giggled and bit his lip, making him groan as a sharp surge of desire rushed through him. "Damn, that's just cold," he quipped. Arya laughed, loving his playful demeanor, and when he made a grab for her, she quickly drew back from him. "You, sir, are courting danger," she teased. "I live for this kind of danger with you, my angel," Nathaniel replied, his voice laced with affection. The endearment made Arya meet his gaze, holding it for a moment longer than usual. She smiled warmly, but as his eyes shifted to the lined-up test tubes on the table, the playfulness faded from his expression. Directing his gaze at hers, he threw her a questioning look. "First you do your exercise, second we clean you up, third I'll take the test samples to run as you asked," Arya promptly replied, giving him a searching gaze. Nathaniel nodded. Although he had been the one to request the test, it didn't stop the surge of fear that struck his heart. "All right. What kind of exercise do you have in mind, Mom?" he asked, attempting to keep the discussion light. Arya played a slow song from her phone, and Nathaniel chuckled as the familiar melody filled the room. Memories of her goading him to dance with her at his apartment in school resurfaced, making him laugh as she offered him her hand, beaming with smiles. "Dance with me," she invited. "Are you sure you want to dance to this particular song with me, Ariana?" he teased. "Why, yes, sir, or what? You don't think you can keep up?" she retorted playfully. Nathaniel's eyes flashed darkly at the challenge, and he grabbed her hand, pulling her close. She giggled as he twirled her around and brought her back against his chest, holding her by the small of her back. They began to sway gently to the slow, rhythmic sound. "Now who is courting danger, Mrs. Hawthorne?" he rasped. Arya gazed up at him with adoring eyes. He lowered his face and kissed her again. Much later, after Arya had helped him clean up and he had changed clothes, Nathaniel perched on the edge of the bed as Arya prepared the instruments for the test extraction. Although she had done this so many times before, it still didn't make it easy. She hated causing him pain, and the anxiety was nearly crushing. Moving to the side of the bed, she held the sides of his neck with both hands and said, "Let's do this." Her voice was low and barely above a whisper. Nathaniel nodded in response. Arya helped to remove his top and pressed a kiss to the base of his neck before Nathaniel lowered to the bed, lying on his side. "Ready?" she asked, her tone filled with a tenderness reserved only for him. Nathaniel gave her a small nod, though she could sense the tension in his body, with his jaw set with determination. No matter how many times they did this, the procedure was never pleasant. She reached for the small syringe designed specifically for the aspiration, positioning it at his pelvic bone. Nathaniel's heart picked up speed, but his face betrayed no sign of pain as the needle penetrated his skin. Arya deftly drew the sample. The suction of the syringe created a brief, sharp pressure that made Nathaniel inhale sharply, but he remained silent, staring into space. Almost done, Arya's murmur filled the room, her voice soft and calming. She then quickly prepared the biopsy needle, drawing a small core of solid marrow tissue. Nathaniel winced slightly but made no sound. Once the second sample was secured, Arya placed it in the next test tube and set it aside for processing. All done, she said, offering him a reassuring smile as she wiped the area clean and applied a small bandage. Nathaniel sat up, rubbing his side slightly. There's no getting used to that, he muttered in jest, though there was a hint of apprehension in his deep voice. I'm sorry, my love, Arya replied, cupping his jaw for a quick kiss before leaving the room and heading to the console in the corner of the makeshift theatre. There, she began processing the samples. She slid the test tubes into place and started the analysis. The machine hummed quietly, scanning the marrow for any trace of abnormal cells. Nathaniel got up on his own, feeling the strain of the stitches on his chest, but he sat up and smiled to himself, proud of that small but meaningful victory. He then gingerly strolled across the room, crossing the adjoining door to where Arya was busy at work, watching as the machines whirred while processing his samples. He moved to stand behind her. How long do we need to wait? He asked. The initial results will take about 15 to 30 minutes, but the detailed genetic and molecular tests will take a bit longer, maybe a few hours. That will give us a clearer picture of any potential microscopic changes or mutations. Nathaniel nodded and wrapped his arms around her shoulders, pulling her firmly against his body. We have time to catch up, then, he rasped, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. Arya craned her neck to look up at him, her eyes dimming into a smile. Tell me, Arya, how are you? He asked, his voice soft and tender. Arya blinked, a bit surprised by the question. I haven't forgotten you just gave me 3 more babies. Come on, darling, you must be exhausted, he added, concern lacing his words. Arya's eyes pricked with tears. Thank you, baby. I'm doing well, really. Thanks to the wonderful community of family you've built for us, we have all the help we need, with everyone eager to lend a hand. I'm getting plenty of sleep, eating properly, and staying on top of my medication. Dr. Sterling and Rowan are always reminding me to rest, and with so many babysitters available, it's been quite manageable, to be honest. I kid you not, even Andrew is offering to babysit the babies. Can you imagine that? She quipped, making Nathaniel chuckle with pleasure. Arya raised her hand to cup his jaw. You wonderful man. How on earth do you think I would let something like childbearing keep me from keeping you with us? She whispered, her voice catching with emotion. Nathaniel's eyes instantly welled with tears, and he lowered his face to rest his forehead against hers. Thank you, baby, he rasped against her lips. You're most welcome, my love, she replied softly. The hum of the machine alerted them that the initial test results were ready. Arya turned her attention to the monitor, her heart racing as the first results started to appear on the screen. Her eyes flicked through each number and detail, silently and hurriedly absorbing the information. After about a minute, she turned to face him, her face brightening with a smile. Still cancer-free, she whispered, her voice barely containing her joy. Nathaniel exhaled deeply, meeting her gaze before pulling her into his arms. Told you you'd be fine, Arya murmured against his chest. I'll never get tired of hearing you say that, Nathaniel replied, burying his nose in her hair. Don't forget we still have to wait for the remaining test, he added. Arya snaked her arms around his slim waist, tightening her hold on him. Let me enjoy this, Nathan, she admonished. Sorry, he chuckled, letting out a sigh. I take it Ethan and the rest of the gang are off to Paris? Nathaniel asked as he guided Arya back to the adjoining room. Yes, they left around 5 a.m. Stephen, Lewis and Jordan went with them, she replied. Nathaniel smiled at her response, pleased that she was learning to know all the Hawthorne guards by name. Then she added, I know that because I asked the same question you just asked me, and that was Andrew's response. Nathaniel shook with laughter. Early that morning, Lewis left the Hawthorne estate to pick up Miss Devereaux, while Ethan, Alex and Anna made their way to the airport, where one of the Hawthorne jets was being prepared for their flight to Paris. Lewis was pleased to see that Miss Devereaux came out almost immediately after he called to inform her of his arrival. As the jeep moved, she asked, Are we going back to the boss's house to pick up Mr. Blackwood? Looking at her in the rearview mirror, Lewis replied, No, Mum, we're meeting them at the airport. Oh, thanks, she responded. Isla wanted to ask who the them was, but struggled to find the right words. While she felt relieved that she would not be alone with Mr. Blackwood, she was also anxious about having company, as it would complicate any chance of discussing the kiss they had shared the night before. She was pretty sure she hadn't slept a wink after that kiss. The emotions it had sparked kept her wide awake, her mind racing to make sense of it all. One moment he had been accusing her of something terrible, and she had nearly slugged him. The next minute he had stunned her with a kiss that had turned her brain into marshmallow, leaving her feeling like a simpleton. She couldn't get the taste of him off her tongue, her lips still tingling from the warm memory of his. Heavens, the man could kiss, she thought to herself. She wasn't quite sure of how she was to feel when she saw him again. Just act like it didn't happen, she thought. Maybe it was just a reaction. That very thought made her heart constrict with emotions. Upon arriving at the airport, Lewis took Isla's passport and gestured for her to board the jet. Isla nodded, glancing back at him as she approached the aircraft, observing him as he handed her passport to a man wearing an identification card around his neck. She guessed the man was likely one of the airport security personnel. Taking a deep breath, she paused at the base of the stairs leading up to the jet. As she neared the top stairs landing, Ethan appeared at the entrance, wearing a cream woolen turtleneck that hugged his masculine frame, paired with loose denim pants that accentuated his long, slim legs. His familiar cologne washed over her like a tidal wave as he extended his hand for her to take, offering to help her up. Isla hesitated, captivated by his handsome face and the intensity of his dark eyes meeting hers. His neatly styled hair gave him a polished, gentlemanly look. She felt that accepting his hand would be akin to submitting to whatever might unfold next. Miss Devereux, Ethan murmured under his breath, almost as if nudging her. Isla responded by taking his hand. He helped her up the final step, and without stepping aside, he gazed into her eyes and said, "Welcome aboard." Isla felt as if there was a promise hidden in that statement somehow. A few hours later, back at the Hawthorne household, Dr. Williams and Dr. Rowan had joined Aria and Nathaniel. Just as Dr. Rowan was about to hand Nathaniel the medical report on Samuel Cavalier, the soft hum of machines in the adjacent room broke the silence. Nathaniel's eyes followed Aria as she quietly left the room and walked into the next one. Aria stood in front of the monitors, watching the final stages of the genetic and molecular tests being processed. Dr. Williams and Dr. Rowan came up beside her, standing on either side. Although Nathaniel remained seated on the bed with a calm appearance, his heart raced. He clenched his fist, fighting the tension building within, becoming sharply attuned to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. In the other room, the screen emitted a soft beep, signaling that the results were ready. Aria leaned forward, pulling up the detailed report. She scanned the data carefully, her heart racing as each line confirmed what she had hoped for: no genetic mutations, no signs of microscopic changes, and no trace of cancer in Nathaniel's system. Dr. Williams let out a relieved sigh, and Rowan nodded in acknowledgement. Nathaniel, having left the report Rowan gave him forgotten on his lap, raised his eyes as Aria reappeared and met her gaze as she stood in the adjoining doorway. His heart raced at the glistening tears in her eyes, and when she nodded at him, a shaky smile of relief spread across her face. He remained silent, his breath caught in his chest as she hurried to his side, just as Rowan and Dr. Williams appeared in the doorway. "Congratulations again, Nate," Dr. Williams said, stepping inside. Aria came to stand by Nathaniel's bedside, raising her hand to comb her fingers gently through his hair. "Yes, congratulations again, my love. There are no genetic mutations, no signs of microscopic changes, and no trace of cancer in your blood," Aria whispered. Nathaniel exhaled deeply, finally nodding in acceptance. "How many more times do I need to do this before I'm home free?" he asked, his gaze searching Aria's face, though the question wasn't truly directed at anyone. To his surprise, it was Rowan who responded before Aria or Dr. Williams could. "It's completely understandable to feel uncertain about when you can fully accept being cancer-free," Rowan began, drawing Nathaniel's attention. "Typically, after completing treatment, your doctor will monitor you closely with tests every 3-6 months for the first few years. From what I could see, Dr. Hawthorne is far more on top of it than most. In that sense, you're quite lucky, Mr. Hawthorne." He added a note of admiration in his tone that rubbed Nathaniel the wrong way. After about 5 years of clear results, many doctors consider patients to be in remission or cancer-free, though there's always a small chance of recurrence. Some patients start to feel confident after a few years of clear tests, while others may take longer to trust that the cancer won't return. It's normal to feel anxious, and it's okay to take time to accept your new reality. With your wife's regular monitoring, I'm sure you have nothing to be anxious about. Arya glanced at Rowan and nodded in gratitude, which he returned with a smile. Nathaniel briefly shut his eyes, mentally reminding himself that Rowan was just trying to be supportive. But in his heart, he wished he could tell the guy to get out. "Thanks, Rowan. That pretty much tells me I'm majorly screwed," Nathaniel said dryly. Rowan chuckled softly, lowering his gaze. Dr. Williams shook his head, laughing. "Heavens, Nate," the older man remarked in an incredulous tone. Arya furrowed her brows, giving Nathaniel the scolding look she used to give their boys when they'd done something particularly outlandish. If they were alone, Nathaniel knew he'd tell her next time to ask her boyfriend to keep his opinions to himself. Meanwhile, Ethan and his team were 5 hours into their trip to Paris. The four of them had taken the middle seats, with Alex and Anna on one side of the compartment, while Ethan and Isla were on the other. Isla had done everything possible to avoid looking in Ethan's direction, focusing intently on the book she'd brought along. She wore headphones, listening to the audiobook while her eyes followed the words on the page. Every so often she could feel Ethan watching her, and her pulse would quicken in response. The seating arrangement made her uncomfortable, but there was nothing she could do about it. She would have much preferred to sit next to Anna Morris, who had been warm and welcoming when they boarded. When Ethan had shown her onto the jet, Anna greeted her with a smile and a friendly hug, as if they'd known each other for years. But since Anna and Alex were a couple, it was only natural that they'd want to sit together. Isla had been relieved at the reception she got from Anna Morris and Alex Sterndale, though she was initially confused as to why it hadn't been mentioned when she volunteered to accompany Ethan, that the couple would also be joining them. She quickly realized, though, that they wouldn't have let Ethan make the trip alone. Given how close Ethan was to her boss, so much so that he trusted him to oversee projects in his company, she thought her boss would likely have come along as well if he weren't tied up with something else. It made sense for Anna and Alex to step in to support their friend. Reflecting on it, Isla felt embarrassed for having misread the situation. She had spoken too soon and should have kept quiet, but thankfully, no one had made her feel more awkward about it than she already felt. She carefully cast a furtive glance in Ethan's direction and noticed him staring out the window, his brows furrowed in thought. She wondered what was on his mind as her eyes lingered on his masculine frame. She wished she could read his thoughts to help with whatever was troubling him. When he let out a sigh and shifted his gaze, she quickly looked away, her heart racing, hoping he hadn't caught her watching him. Ethan wasn't particularly thrilled about seeing his mother's body, but he knew there was no avoiding it. He had to retrieve her and allow her to rest in eternal peace, as she deserved. From one perspective, he figured she would finally have the rest she'd never gotten in life, and he didn't think it would be fair to hold on to her after all she had endured for him. Still, despite his rationalizing, as they got closer to their destination, he grew more nervous, dreading the moment he would be forced to identify her. His eyes drifted to Isla Devereux. He couldn't quite say why he'd agreed to let her come along. Deep down, he knew it was because she wanted to be there, not because she was needed. He wondered how she would react when she found out that he and Alex weren't just fluent in French. They were also pretty good in a few other languages. It was something they'd had to learn while being friends with Nathaniel Hawthorne. Nathaniel had a habit of taking them on spontaneous trips, often landing them in places and volatile situations where they had to talk their way out. Nathaniel was proficient in about 20 languages, and back then, Ethan didn't like being outsmarted by what he thought was just a rich brat. He'd quickly changed his mind about Nathaniel when he realized he had struck gold by being paired with him for a project assignment back at Harvard. It turned out Ethan was the one with the snobbery problem, while Nathaniel was just a laid-back guy who enjoyed letting people think he had nothing going for him but his good looks. Ethan had watched Nathaniel use that assumption to his advantage countless times, and his language skills often felt like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. His mind drifted to a particular incident during a yacht race they had with some European jerks in Cyprus. There were 4 guys who kept making disparaging remarks about them, saying something about Americans being unnervingly dumb. Ethan had no idea how Nathaniel always found the will to wait for the right moment to strike. He and Alex had been beyond irate, ready to throw hands, but Nathaniel kept shutting them down with a single look. After the race, when they'd won, the men started accusing them of cheating. Nathaniel had simply looked at them and replied in both Turkish and Greek, his voice calm but cutting a big T. "No, gentlemen, it's called strategy, a concept you might struggle with. Perhaps next time you'll focus more on the race than on underestimating your competition." The men had stood there, momentarily stunned, not expecting Nathaniel to speak their languages fluently. Ethan could still remember the way their smug expressions had faltered, the sting of Nathaniel's words hitting harder than any punch would have. Nathaniel had then added, switching seamlessly back to English, "It's a pity, really. You wasted your breath on insults instead of paying attention to the course. It was a classic Nathaniel move. He didn't just win the race. He left his opponents speechless, dismantling their arrogance with a few well-chosen words." Ethan and Alex, who had been ready for a brawl, couldn't help but admire the way Nathaniel handled it all with such effortless control. And that was one of so many experiences. The jet stewardess emerged from the front cockpit, catching Ethan's attention as she pushed a trolley laden with refreshments and food forward. She smiled and nodded in acknowledgement as she strolled past their seats, heading to the dining table set up at the back. "Your lunch is served," she said as she walked back a few minutes later. "Isla," Anna called as she got up to head to the back of the compartment, but because of her headphones, Isla didn't hear her. Ethan leaned forward, peering at her until she looked up and met his gaze. Her captivating eyes made him feel a surge of warmth spread inside him. He reached forward, gently pulling off one side of her headphones and quipped in a low, husky voice, "Are you still with us?" She blinked, confused, wondering what she had missed. "Isla," Anna called again from the back. Isla's cheeks flushed with color as she quickly stood. Ethan leaned back, chuckling, while she set down her book and headphones to join Anna. The aroma of the mouth-watering spread hit her nostrils, making her stomach grumble with hunger. Isla couldn't bring herself to meet Anna's gaze. She slowly took in the spread of food. The finest crystal glasses sparkled under the soft lighting, and a bottle of vintage Bordeaux wine stood proudly in the center. The meal looked like a feast fit for royalty, reminding her just who she was traveling with, and making her feel nervous all over again. Her idea of an airline meal was a choice between fish or chicken, paired with whatever the airline decided to serve. This, however, looked like something from a very swanky restaurant she would think twice about dining in. Delicate slices of smoked salmon rested on porcelain plates beside a vibrant salad of baby greens, topped with shavings of truffle and drizzled with aged balsamic reduction. A plate of buttery foie gras pâté, served with warm brioche and fig compote, added to the decadence. For the main course, perfectly seared filet mignon lay on a bed of creamy mashed potatoes, surrounded by sautéed wild mushrooms and glazed carrots. A selection of cheeses, brie, camembert, and roquefort, awaited at the edge of the table, accompanied by crusty baguettes and fresh fruit. Isla thought the only reason she could identify the food was because she was a Hawthorne employee, thanks to the end-of-year parties thrown by Nathaniel Hawthorne, who often treated them to lavish meals. "Stephen, Lewis, Jordan, please join us," Alex called from the other side of the compartment, and the men rose from their seats to approach. "Ethan, you coming?" Alex asked Ethan, who didn't make any move to get up. "I'm not sure if it's a good idea for me to eat, man." "Go ahead, I'm fine," Ethan replied. "We still have 2 more hours, and you haven't eaten anything all day, Ethan," Alex said with concern. Everyone turned in their direction. Isla's heart constricted. She wished she could coax him to eat something, but she didn't want to overstep or seem like she was doing too much. He was already suspicious of her attitude toward him. She unconsciously threw Anna a helpless glance. The other woman dropped the plate in her hand and walked back to join Alex and Ethan. Isla thought she would try to plead with him to eat something, but instead, Anna said, "Get up and come eat, Ethan, or I swear I will force-feed you and have Alex take a picture to put online." There was a moment of total silence before Alex and the other men started to laugh. "You are a bloody witch," Ethan said affectionately, but Anna reached for his hand and tugged. Ethan got up and let her lead him to the table. Isla couldn't help but smile. However, when her eyes met Ethan's, his dark, intense gaze made her smile slowly disappear, making her pulse to quicken. Once everyone had settled down, the stewardess came back to pour the Bordeaux with practiced grace, the rich scent of dark berries and oak wafting through the air. She then quietly departed, returning with a silver platter artfully arranged with macarons and petit fours. Isla swallowed softly in anticipation. A little while later, Isla noticed Ethan absent-mindedly picking at his food, and Anna seemed to notice too. The Hawthorne guards had finished their meals and left with their desserts and glasses of wine, leaving Alex, Anna, Ethan, and Isla at the table. Anna reached for Ethan's plate, sliding it closer to Isla, and said, "Feed him. If he refuses to eat, let me know." Alex chuckled when Ethan raised an eyebrow at her. Anna gave Ethan a "my eyes are on you" gesture before she and Alex left the table, taking dessert with them as Anna playfully fed Alex some ice cream. Now alone and feeling somewhat isolated, Isla picked up a piece of fish and potatoes and held it up to Ethan's mouth, cupping her other hand under it. Ethan held her gaze, his dark eyes intense, and said, "You don't have to do what she says. I'm not really hungry." Isla met his gaze and replied softly, "You need to eat something." She waited, expecting him to refuse her offer, but after a moment, he opened his mouth, forcing her to move closer to feed him. She was captivated by how he closed his lips around the cutlery, making her heart race. For the next minute, he let her feed him, almost turning it into a challenge as he continued to look deep into her eyes, as if daring her to keep going. When he leaned in closer, his hands settled on her lap, causing her heart to race in her chest, but she couldn't stop. She sensed he wanted to unsettle her, and she didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing he was getting to her. Ethan didn't realize he had finished eating until she raised his glass to offer him some wine. He took it from her steady hand and sipped, while still maintaining eye contact, his other hand gently stroking her thigh through her dress. When she attempted to pull away, he dropped the glass on the table, cupped the back of her neck, and pulled her face closer to kiss her, pouring wine from his mouth into hers. The flavor spread on her tongue as he captured and suckled her tongue. Isla felt as if her mind were short-circuiting as she quivered under his touch until he finally pulled back. She let out a shaky breath, giving him a searching gaze as he looked into her eyes. "Thanks, Miss Devereux," he rasped before rising from his seat. He offered her his hand, and Isla dazedly accepted it, letting him help her up. "What should we bring back to our seats? More wine, ice cream, macarons, or petit fours?" Ethan asked, scooping a small amount of chocolate ice cream with a spoon and holding it up to her lips. "A taste?" he added, his eyes hungry for her response. Isla nodded and slowly parted her lips. Ethan placed the ice cream in her mouth, his entire body yearning for satisfaction as he moved closer, using his thumb to gently stroke her bottom lip. Everything in him screamed to stop, to pull back and end the madness, but he had never wanted any woman as much as he wanted this green-eyed witch. He was certain he would have kissed her again if the pilot's voice hadn't echoed through the compartment, informing them that they were already in France. "We should return to our seats," he said, his voice sounding a tad gruff. Isla couldn't bring herself to say a word. Turning around, she headed back without waiting for him. She settled into her seat just before he joined her, but he came bearing dessert, crushed macarons and chocolate ice cream. Her lips curled into a smile at the combination. When she raised her eyes to meet his, he wasn't smiling back at her. His eyes held promises of all kinds of sweet torture that made her pulse race. As the private jet touched down at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, the atmosphere shifted for Ethan. The pilot's voice echoed through the cabin, informing them they had arrived. Even after they were cleared by airport security, they waited in the jet for the officers who had called to inform Ethan of his mother's passing to arrive. Soon enough, Louis ushered in an average-height man in uniform who wore a somber demeanor. Everyone got up. "Good afternoon, I'm Officer Moreau. I was the one who called to inform you about the passing of Mrs. Blackwood," he began, introducing himself with a voice tinged with sympathy. "Thank you, officer," "I'm Ethan Blackwood," Ethan said as he stepped forward for a handshake. "Please accept my most sincere condolences," the officer responded. Ethan nodded, feeling grateful to be surrounded by friends. It might seem crazy, but he could sense Isla behind him. "Mr. Andrew has made arrangements for her body to be transported back to the United States. She will be moved to a cargo jet, and all we need is your confirmation to identify the body," the officer continued. The news felt surreal. Ethan nodded again, his heart heavy. "I understand," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The officer nodded back, motioning for Ethan to follow him. Ethan, along with Lewis, Jordan, Alex, Anna, and Isla, exited the jet and were escorted to 2 waiting vehicles that were to take them to the morgue where Ethan's mother's body was kept. Ethan found himself seated next to Isla. The drive felt interminable, each moment stretching as he braced himself for what lay ahead. Upon arriving at the morgue, Ethan walked inside, flanked by Alex, Lewis, Jordan, and Stephen for support. The cold, sterile environment contrasted sharply with the warmth of memories he held of his mother. Officer Moreau led them down a stark hallway to a small, private room where the body had been prepared and readied for transportation. As Ethan entered, he found his mother lying on a gurney with a fancy casket set against a side wall. He mentally thanked Nathaniel and Andrew for arranging this ahead of time, making it easier for him. The sight of his mother struck him deeply. She seemed peaceful, as if she were in no eternal sleep. Her once vibrant face now looked serene, untouched by the turmoil of life. As soon as Ethan nodded in confirmation, Officer Moreau gestured to 4 men on standby, and they immediately moved in to carry the body and place it in the casket. Once the casket was covered, they carried it out, and Ethan felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Ethan took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, attempting to rein in his emotions. "We'll ensure everything is handled at the airport, and then the jet to carry her can leave," the officer added, breaking the silence. "Thank you, Officer Moreau. We really appreciate this," Alex said, giving the man a nod. He then ushered Ethan outside, noting how stiffly he walked, as if he were holding everything in. As the men emerged from inside the building, Isla threw Ethan an anxious look, but he didn't glance at her or Anna. Lewis, Stephen, and Jordan led them back to the waiting car for the airport. "Have you ever been to Paris, Miss Devereaux?" Ethan forced himself to say, trying everything he could not to think that his mother was now lifeless and in a box. Isla shook her head, studying his withdrawn gaze with concern. "I'm sorry that you had to visit this beautiful place under these circumstances then. Perhaps we could visit some other time, right, Anna?" Ethan said. "Yes, we certainly will," Anna promptly replied, giving Ethan a smile less, though her eyes glistened with tears. Upon reaching the airport, they waited, watching as the casket was loaded onto another Hawthorne jet. This one a cargo jet, with the Hawthorne guards handling the transition. Isla moved closer to Ethan until the back of her hand brushed against his. She let out a shallow breath as he intertwined his fingers with hers in a tight grip. She cast him a side glance, but he didn't return the look. His eyes were fixed on the casket. Isla was just glad she could be there for him. However, when the transition was complete and the doors of the cargo jet closed, Lewis spoke in French to thank the officers. Ethan also chipped in, expressing his gratitude in French. Isla mentally cursed, feeling utterly mortified. Officer Moreau tipped an imaginary hat at all of them before leading his men away. Stephen led their team back to their jet, and as Isla walked beside Ethan, she asked, "Why didn't you tell me you could speak French? I didn't want to take away your excuse for wanting to come. Perhaps before we get back home, you could enlighten me, Miss Devereaux, on why you wanted to come with me," Ethan replied without looking at her. After a few strides, he cast her a sidelong glance. Isla almost missed her step, as something in those dark, intense eyes told her he knew she wanted him. Meanwhile, back at the Hawthorne estate, Jake begins his day by preparing to head to the New York State Penitentiary. Not wanting anyone to know where he was going, he simply took the morning off and drove to the airport, where the Hawthorne family's hangar was located, to catch a helicopter. His destination was 400 miles away, a journey that would take at least 6 to 7 hours by car. With the helicopter, however, It would only take an hour and a half to get there and about 3.5 hours for the round trip, including the short time he needed to see his latest person of interest. A short while later, he parked his car in the airport parking lot and started walking toward the hangar. It was freezing, and he hoped the weather would work in his favor. As he made his way down the tarmac, his mind drifted to the previous day when he had left Dr. Evangeline Hart on the porch to go to the kitchen, only to be bombarded by Miss Jonas with innuendos about how winter was the perfect time to fall in love. He chuckled fondly, thinking the woman was becoming an old meddler. Jake recalled leaving the kitchen much later and going upstairs. When he reached his door, he could still hear hushed voices coming from the nursery. Padding across the hallway to peer inside, he saw Evangeline and Noria sitting on the floor on the area rug with books spread out between them. Evangeline had several cue cards in her hands and was asking Noria questions, to which the two would cheer quietly whenever she got the answer right. Jake couldn't help but stare at Eva's face, animated with pure joy. He thought she was breathtakingly beautiful. The memory of the kiss they had shared hit him with full force. He then remembered his promise to her, his heart aching as if he'd lost someone important to him. The pain was so intense it felt almost physical. A frown formed a groove between his straight, thick eyebrows as he retreated to his room, praying for sleep. He wasn't surprised that it took a while, but he eventually drifted off. Earlier, when he had stepped out of his room, he saw a folder at his doorstep. Picking it up, he realized it was the report he'd asked Eva to make. Flipping it open, he headed to the nursery and found Anita there with Noria and Eva both asleep on the floor. Anita had giggled quietly at his frown and gestured for him to leave, blowing him a kiss. He grinned as he walked away, wondering how long the two had studied and when they had finally fallen asleep. As Jake arrived at the Hawthorne hangar, his thoughts turned to Evangeline. He knew that if he could trust his emotions, he would have pursued her with everything in him. But he couldn't. He was terrible at making the right choices when it came to women. Even though his heart raced at the thought of Evangeline Hart and her kisses made him imagine putting babies in her. He knew it would pass. It always did. He just needed to give it time. And of course, repay her for helping with his child. The report she had completed about the BioSync womb incubator was quite thorough, and although Jake wasn't a scientist or a doctor, something she had said about its impact on natural baby development bothered him. He had lost so much in his life, he was tired of losing more. The thought of losing his son on top of everything else was unbearable. A few minutes later, he was up in the air, alone with his thoughts. He couldn't believe how persistent his mind was in drifting back to Eva. It was so frustrating, especially considering that just a few days earlier, he had married another woman. "This is madness," he muttered to himself. "It will pass," he said aloud, trying to convince himself. An hour and a half later, he touched down at one of the Hawthorns' helipads and borrowed a Bronco from one of the employees heading out. By the time he arrived at his destination, 2 men were waiting for him. As he parked, they checked their watches and smirked as he approached. "It's refreshing to know old habits die hard with your Darfield." "I hope that's the only habit we have to worry about today," one of the men quipped. He was an average-height older gentleman with tan skin and a face etched with age lines that told their own story. The other man was taller, more like Jake in build, and he wore an eye patch that made him look even more formidable. "Nice to see you too, Brooke. And you as well, August," Jake greeted them, smiling as he pulled Brooke into a hug. "How are your wives?" Jake inquired as they headed to the entrance. "Happy, I hope," the big guy, Brooke, replied. "Mine is, thank you for the pay for this visit, though I hope you won't make us regret it," August added. "I gave you my word, didn't I?" Jake replied, raising an eyebrow. "And we believe you," August said simply, "until we saw the guy's criminal report. That's the only thing that would get the Punisher interested in such a fellow." "An abusive scum," Brooke stated. "I just want to warn him this time. That's it," Jake reiterated for the umpteenth time. With Brooke and August leading, the correctional officers were just opening the gates for them until they reached the warden. Jake was asked to wait in a room, and soon a man about 6'1" was brought in, cuffed and shackled at the ankles. The man had tattoos peeking out from his sleeves and the base of his neck. His hair was shaved close to his scalp, and his dark eyes studied Jake coldly, silently sizing him up. "Please take the chains off for just a few minutes, will you?" Jake said. The warden shot a look at the lieutenant, who nodded before the officers removed the shackles, leaving only the handcuffs. Jake gestured for the inmate to take a seat, and he did so with a confident swagger that almost made Jake chuckle. Jake took the seat opposite him, with August and Brooke standing behind him, along with 3 armed guards. The inmate grinned, his eyes moving from one man to the other. "All these guards for me?" he quipped. "No," Jake replied, causing the punk to return his cold gaze to Jake. "They're here to prevent me from killing you," he said with a grin. The other man's cold demeanor flickered before he glowered at Jake. "Who are you and what do you want?" he snarled. Jake calmly pulled out a portion of Evangeline's report that he had printed, the part where the police had found her passed out with blood trickling from her throat. The inmate instantly jerked back upon seeing the picture. "That's the broad that put me here. Who the hell are you to her?" "Not that it matters. No matter how long it takes, I'm going to find her and finish what I started," he ranted. Before he could continue, Jake growled deep in his throat. "Sit down." He didn't raise his voice, but it still managed to get through to the guy. Jake slowly stood up and Brooke quickly interjected, "Come on, we've discussed this. Don't let the fool rile you up." Jake noticed that the officers immediately circled him, somewhat boxing him in, making Luke pause to pay attention. The other man then returned to his seat and sat down slowly. "I came here to tell you something. Before, when you knew Dr. Hart, she was free for you to hurt and do whatever you wanted with. But as of right now, she is under the protection of Nathaniel Hawthorne," he said, watching as the guy's eyes widened, then darkened with fury. "What that means, Luke Greetham, is that she is under the protection of over 5,000 ex-Marines, myself included. You must accept that when you did this to her, she died," Jake said, raising his eyes to hold Luke's equally cold ones. "If you see her on the streets, you keep walking and act like you don't know her," he warned. "That broad owes me her life," Luke Greetham growled. "Why is that? Tell me. Why does she owe you her life?" Jake probed, his fists clenching in an effort to rein in his anger. "She freaking put me in here. She and that damn old fool in her hospital, that old bastard Williams," he retorted. "What did you do?" Jake asked, glaring at Luke, who met his gaze with hostility. "She led me on and then turned around to say no," he shot back. "So you had a hot for this girl, and when she had the audacity to say no, you tried to kill her?" Jake asked. "She led me on," he insisted again. "And I'm telling you, if you had just accepted no for an answer, you wouldn't be here. I've delivered my message," Jake said as he started to rise. "And if I refuse, what the hell are you going to do about it?" he mocked. Brooke swore as Jake's hand moved like lightning to seize Luke by the jugular, his nails digging into Luke's skin as the guy fought to get free, his face draining of color and his eyes becoming bloodshot. "Please let him go," August pleaded with ardent urgency as the prison security aimed their weapons at them. "Eek," Luke croaked, tears streaming down his face. Jake leaned closer and whispered, "I'm going to kill you in the most brutal and unforgiving way you can imagine. That's what I'm going to do." Then he shoved Luke away, causing him to collapse into the chair, gasping for breath, blood and nail marks on his throat. Brooke and August apologized to the warden as they escorted Jake out. Once outside the penitentiary, August released a deep breath while Brooke began to laugh. "Damn it, you almost gave me a heart attack," August said to Jake. "Sorry," Jake replied simply, his blood still boiling from the encounter, though he tried to keep it under control. Meanwhile, back at the Hawthorne estate, Anton did his best to stay detached and not dwell on the pain of losing Dawn even before he could truly have her. Although he believed she must feel something for him, he wasn't sure how deep those feelings ran. Since she didn't know about his conversation with her father, he figured he could carry on as if nothing had happened and avoid causing unnecessary drama between them. Dawn had been too busy the past few days, and Anton believed that if he focused more on his work, she might not notice any difference. Perhaps in time she would lose interest, and they might drift apart. The thought made his heart ache, but he felt he had no choice. As soon as he finished breakfast, he headed out to the security office at the estate gate, where he stayed and turned off his phone. When Will arrived sometime later and saw him in the control room, he teased, "I know it's cold as hell, but it's unlike you to crawl in here to hide from it." "I just need a break, man," Anton replied, hoping he sounded like his regular self. "Okay, if you say so," Will said. "I suppose the bonfire night the men are planning tonight will help everyone shake off the cold blues, at least." Just then, another Hawthorne guard strolled in. After they exchanged pleasantries, Anton asked, "You said bonfire night? Is it that time of the year already?" Will pointed to the calendar. "Yep, and this year I've set my sights on asking Dr. Hart to be my date," he said. Anton frowned, thinking that perhaps Will didn't know Dr. Hart was off limits, but he wasn't sure if it was his place to say anything. "Lucky for you, you have a date to take already. I hope she won't mind taking a few hours off," Will continued. "I don't know, man. Don't get your hopes up. She's here to take care of babies, and Aiden will want to take Noria, while Andrew will naturally want to take his woman," one of the other guards interjected. "It doesn't hurt to ask. You never know," Will replied. Anton's concentration was divided. He didn't like that the bonfire night was that day. If he didn't show up or ask Dawn, it would be obvious something was wrong. Frustrated, he got up and strode out while the men continued talking. Back at the Hawthorne building, Tom entered the kitchen around 8 a.m. and saw Bella there with Miss Jonas and Miss Everly. She had been giving him the cold shoulder since the night before, when she'd asked what he had done to upset their daughter, and he had only told her he was protecting her without offering details. Bella had hurried after Dawn, and she hadn't been in the room when he'd finally decided to go face her. Even though there were signs she had been in the room, she hadn't returned to sleep in the room with him. He hadn't been able to sleep either, hating that both Bella and Dawn refused to see things from his point of view, painting him as the bad guy. He thought maybe he should tell them the truth about Anton. Perhaps that would open their eyes. He figured they probably saw the Hawthorne guards as just some wealthy man's aesthetic for security, unaware that all the men were trained killers with dark pasts. Maybe if he told them that Anton, due to his PTSD, was capable of waking up one day and killing his entire family, they might take him more seriously. "Good morning, ladies," Tom greeted as he strode into the kitchen. Miss Everly and Miss Jonas, along with a few kitchen staff, responded to his greeting, but Bella didn't even look at him. "Would you like your breakfast, Mr. Hill?" Miss Jonas asked. "No, thank you. I'm not hungry. Coffee will do," he replied, watching as Bella's brows furrowed in disapproval. "Please don't give him coffee unless he eats something, even if it's just a sandwich," Bella said in a tight voice. Miss Jonas nodded, giving Tom a subtle smile before doing as Bella instructed. Tom sat down and ate, trying to figure out how to get her to talk to him. At least it was obvious she didn't hate him yet. The opportunity came when Miss Everly's phone chimed with an alarm, and she said, "Excuse me, please, I need to check on the babies." Bella nodded and said, "I'll join you soon." Tom nodded, giving Miss Everly a smile as she left. He then exchanged a silent look with Miss Jonas before she quietly left with the other maids, leaving him alone with Bella. "I'm sorry about yesterday, Bella," he rasped, pausing to see if she would respond, but she said nothing. He added, "I know these men. I was part of the team that recruited them. Trust me when I say Anton is not right for Dawn." Bella threw him a sideways glance, meeting his pleading eyes. "That's not your decision, though, Tom. She's an adult. Let her make her own mistakes," Bella said. "And what if this mistake leads to her getting killed?" Tom pressed, noticing the gleam of doubt and concern in her eyes. "What if I told you Anton was once convicted for killing an entire family, his family?" Tom said. "But he didn't do it, though." Andrew's sharp voice cut through the air. Tom cursed mentally, shutting his eyes, not liking that Andrew had heard him. Andrew marched across the room to stand by the island table, making sure Tom could see his face. He was trembling with rage. "We had an agreement, Mr. Hill," Andrew growled. "You are not to talk about my men's past with anyone," he added forcefully. "Bella is my wife and the mother of my daughter. I'm only trying to protect Dawn," Tom growled back. "Then protect her without casting shade on my men," Andrew thundered. "You will watch your tone, MacLeod," Tom snarled. "Or what, Mr. Hill?" Andrew challenged. "Gentlemen, please stop." Bella interjected, her voice filled with concern. Anton was indeed convicted of killing his family, his brother and his wife, Miss Bella, Andrew said in a low, angry tone, but he was framed. He was set up, and the people responsible were later prosecuted. Andrew explained to Miss Bella, needing her not to believe whatever nonsense Mr. Hill was trying to concoct. Why did they think he could do it, Andrew? That's what I'm trying to get at, Tom roared. So he has PTSD? I do too, Mr. Hill. And I've lived here for decades without going on a killing spree, Andrew said. That's beside the point, Tom fired back, but Andrew cut him off. Protect your daughter, Mr. Hill, but don't cast my men as potential murderers. I won't have it, Andrew retorted. Lower your damn voice when you talk to me, boy, Tom snarled. My men would die protecting you and your family because, to us, your family is our family, and you dare. I'm sorry, Mr. Hill, that sometimes we forget blood is thicker, Andrew growled before storming away. Tom was fuming, but deep down, he knew he had messed up. Letting out a sigh, he sat down, holding his head in his hands. Toms, Bella called softly, making him look up. I know, I messed up. I'll go and apologize, he said immediately. Bella reached up to cup his jaw. Let Dawn make her own choice. Don't meddle, please, she implored. Tom nodded with a sigh of resignation. He wasn't sure how to navigate the issue, but he was almost certain that if Anton found out he'd told Dawn's mother about his past in an attempt to keep him away from Dawn, Anton would never come near her again. Rubbing his hands over his face, Tom tried to figure out how to fix this. First, though, he knew he needed to talk to Andrew, if the other man would even agree to speak with him, that is. Tom got up and reached for Bella, pressing a kiss on her lips. She let him, and his heart constricted with emotion. He then headed out, but instead of first looking for Andrew as planned, he went upstairs to Nate, knowing he was the only one who could help make things right. Upon reaching the makeshift theatre room, he found Dr. Hawthorne, Dr. Rowan, and Dr. Williams in the lab's surgical theatre, while Nathaniel was in his old room on the bed, going through a report. Weren't you supposed to be resting? Tom asked, his voice revealing his anxiety as he caught Nathaniel's attention. Nathaniel's gaze shifted to Tom's hands, noting his fidgeting. When he looked up, he found Tom avoiding eye contact, nervously shifting from one foot to the other. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes, taking in Tom's demeanor. What did you do now, Tom? He sighed, already bracing himself for trouble. The first thing Dawn Hill did when she woke up the morning after overhearing the conversation between her father and Anton was pack her belongings. She had been considering moving to New York, as her mother had suggested, partly because of Anton, but now the thought of seeing him now and then, knowing she couldn't be with him, seemed unbearable. She doubted her heart would ever heal. A small voice inside urged her to go to him, to try and talk things through, but she knew that for a man like Anton, one who always asked if she truly wanted him before making love to her, honor meant everything. She was certain he had spoken to her father out of respect for both of them. Maybe, like her, he wanted something more. That thought brought fresh tears to her eyes. If only he had told her first, she would have gone with him to confront her father. She was sure her presence would have made her father more cautious, fearing he might lose her if he said the wrong thing. But now, she can't see a way to fix it. Anton's firm agreement with her father's stance echoed in her mind, making her cry quietly. He had sounded so defeated. Anton, she whispered, tears falling. Later she forced herself to get up and wash her face, determined to leave before everyone woke up. The idea of not saying goodbye to Liam, Owen, the triplets, or her new friends, Noria, Miss Anita, Dr. Hawthorne, and the others, threatened to overwhelm her with more tears, but she took a deep breath and resolved to figure out a way to slip out without her father noticing. She dressed warmly in winter clothes, slipping on dark sunglasses to conceal her swollen, tear-streaked eyes, and headed out. Upon reaching the ground floor, she walked down the hallway toward the kitchen. Pausing at the entrance, she peeked in and saw her parents sitting close together, speaking in low, hushed voices. Seeing her father stirred a surge of anger in her, anger and hurt for the pain he had caused. That fury steeled her resolve, and she turned away, heading out. Standing on the front porch, she let out a shaky breath, watching the cold air form in front of her. The estate grounds were blanketed in snow, and with the layout of the Hawthorne estate, the view was breathtaking. The snow was pristine, untouched by dirt, and the plants and flowers were dusted with flakes, creating a serene, natural beauty. She imagined how lovely and magical it must look when decorated for the holidays. A wave of sadness swept over her as she realized she was about to leave behind such a beautiful place, along with the newfound family, love, and future she once believed she'd found here. She stepped off the porch with determination and made her way down the stairs. There were no guards in sight, which made sense. It was bitterly cold outside. Dawn figured they were probably holed up in the security hangouts or the office. Between the gym, the guard's apartment, and the security office near the estate gate, she tried to remember which was closer. The sound of boots crunching through the snow made her pick up her pace toward the gate. She didn't want to explain to anyone why she was outside or where she was going. She just needed someone to get her out of the estate, and after that she'd manage on her own. Meanwhile, Anton had just left the security house, still preoccupied with how to get through the day, especially with the impending bonfire night threatening to expose the cracks in his relationship with Dawn. He thought a long walk might clear his head, maybe even help him figure out a way to leave the estate altogether. As he walked, he considered talking to Andrew, or even Jake. Maybe one of them could come up with a solution. Anything to help him. A few minutes into his walk, he saw a figure approaching. His body tensed when he recognized it was Dawn. What is she doing out here in this cold? He thought, a mix of anger and concern rising inside him. His heart sped up as he recalled that he wasn't supposed to be near her anymore. He cursed under his breath, angry at his rotten luck. As if things weren't bad enough, now he was going to have to break up with her. He watched as she spotted him, her step faltering. Anton's heart raced, unsure how to handle the situation. Should he greet her and keep walking, pretend everything was fine? Or maybe just act like his usual self? Though he didn't feel up to it, the idea of politely saying hello and moving on seemed best. He was hurting and angry at the world for always taking away the things he cared about. And he definitely wasn't in the mood to talk about his feelings. His frustration deepened at the thought that she might not even feel as intensely as he did, and he didn't want to make things any more awkward between them. Before he could dwell on it further, they were suddenly almost face to face. "Good day to you, Miss Hill," Anton rasped, walking right past her. It felt as if someone had torn Dawn's heart out in the cruelest way. She turned, watching his tall figure move farther and farther away, her vision blurred with tears, and she stood there stunned. Was that it? Was he really going to walk past her like she was a stranger after everything they had been through? "Really, Anton?" she cried, her voice thick with pain. Anton stopped, not because she shouted, but because of the depth of anguish in those two words. Slowly he turned to face her. "I need to be somewhere." "Sorry," he lied. "That's fine, I guess," Dawn replied, her voice trembling as she tried to catch her breath, tears still falling. "Can you at least help me find a way out of here? I need to get to the airport. Please," she added. Anton's chest tightened, the pain so sharp he had to breathe carefully. He took a few steps back towards her. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice sounding gruff as it became clear that she must have found out. Dawn gave a small shrug. "There's nothing here for me anymore," she muttered, keeping her gaze down, relieved she had her sunglasses to hide the tears. "Your parents are here?" Anton whispered as he came closer, standing just inches away. "Yeah," she said flatly, "but can you help me? I need to leave." "I can't do that, Dawn," Anton answered softly. Dawn nodded, her tone hardening. "Thanks for nothing. I'll find someone who can," she said sharply, turning to leave. But Anton grabbed her arm, stopping her. She looked up at him, her eyes flashing with frustration. "Do you mind?" she snapped. Anton ignored her words, his heart pounding as a flicker of hope surged through him. He reached for her sunglasses and gently removed them. "Anton, stop," Dawn protested, but he continued, slipping the glasses into his pocket and lifting her chin to meet his eyes. His breath caught when he saw her puffy red eyes. "You do care," he murmured softly. "What's that supposed to mean?" she shot back, fresh tears streaming down her face. "I don't know, Dawn. Maybe you were just having fun with me. I mean, I am pretty good looking." Anton said, a fresh surge of emotions rushing through him. Dawn shook her head, a faint laugh escaping at his ridiculous comment. She couldn't believe he was joking at a moment like this. "You're full of it, Anton," she replied, a hint of fondness creeping into her voice. Anton cupped her face with his gloved hands, his gaze searching hers. "So is this more than just two adults exploring, Miss Hill?" he pressed, needing her to tell him what she truly felt. "I'm actually insulted that you'd even think that, let alone say it out loud." Dawn shot back. "Forgive me," Anton said softly, "but aside from my good looks, I've got nothing going for me." Dawn raised an eyebrow at him. He smiled as he gently stroked her face. "I'm half emotionally and mentally damaged, darling. And your father knows that," Anton began to say. "I don't care, Anton," Dawn replied fervently. "I do. I do care, baby. And I get why your father feels the way he does. That's the worst part. If I had a daughter, I wouldn't want her with a guy like me either. I'd be over the moon to know what you feel for me runs deeper than just sex, but you need to be really sure of what you want with me before you say anything else. You've given me a taste of what it's like to be with you, and now I'm addicted. I can't sleep without wanting to cuddle with you. Do you have any idea how crippling that is for someone like me? I need to be alert to do my job, but I can't focus if I can't even sleep," Anton said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. He leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. "I'm in love with you, Miss Hill," he confessed. Dawn let out a shaky breath, fresh tears spilling from her eyes. "Please don't tell me that because you love me, you have to respect my father's wishes. I'd rather you said nothing at all and just let me go," she sobbed. "Then tell me, Miss Hill," Anton murmured. "What do you want?" "I want you," she cried softly. "I love you so much it hurts, Anton," she added, shaking with tears. "Shh," Anton soothed, his heart soaring at her words. "Don't cry, please don't cry," he whispered, pulling her tightly into his arms. He held her close, resting his chin on her head, breathing in her scent, savoring the moment as her words echoed in his mind. "I know you. I know you'll do what my father says, and I can't stay here, Anton." "I'm not strong enough," Dawn said against his chest, her voice trembling. Anton smiled softly, pulling back slightly to meet her gaze. "I need to tell you something about me. If after I tell you you still want me, then I'll let you see a side of me you haven't seen yet, Miss Hill," he said. "What is it?" Dawn asked hesitantly, a touch of fear in her voice. "We should get out of the snow first." "Let's go to my place," Anton suggested, giving her a questioning look. Dawn nodded. Anton wrapped an arm around her small frame, drawing her close as they both walked back toward the estate. They had barely passed the Hawthorne house when Dawn's phone rang. She pulled it out of her jacket and Anton caught a glimpse of the number. "I wonder who this is," she muttered under her breath. "It's Andrew," Anton said, taking the phone from her to answer the call. "Why the hell is your phone off?" was Andrew's immediate greeting. Anton was impressed that Andrew knew he was with Dawn and that he'd be the one answering. "Sorry, boss," Anton replied. "Come to the house now," Andrew ordered, before abruptly ending the call. Anton let out a deep sigh. This was exactly what he had been trying to avoid, drama. But at this point, knowing Dawn loved him as much as he loved her, he couldn't hide anymore. That is, if she still wanted him after he told her that he did, in fact, have a brother and a sister-in-law who was now dead, and that he had tried to limit his memories of his brother to their younger days, creating an illusion that his brother was still alive, avoiding the painful truth by all means. He would have to admit that he had caused their deaths, his brother's and his pregnant sister-in-law's, because he had chosen duty over family and then had gotten irresponsibly drunk, leaving him incapable of protecting them. He wondered if Dawn would still look at him the same after hearing the truth. Would she still say she wanted him? Dawn scrutinized Anton closely, wondering if this was what he had mentioned earlier that he needed to get to. "Am I keeping you from work?" she probed, a hint of guilt in her voice. Anton shook his head in negation. He then handed her phone back, cupped her face, and kissed her. Dawn inhaled sharply as their lips met, instantly standing on her toes to reach him, returning his fervent kiss. "I love you," Dawn whispered against his lips, her eyes closed, her body leaning into his in total submission. "You're going to make me make love to you out here, Dawn Hill, if you keep this up." Anton teased, delight in his tone. Dawn giggled. It was unbelievable how one person could send him on a rollercoaster ride of emotions within minutes. Just moments ago, he had felt as if his life were truly over, but he hadn't kissed her for no reason. He had kissed her to remind himself of what he was about to fight for. His future. Come, let's get you inside. I need to see Andrew, he rasped. Dawn eagerly nodded. Meanwhile, early on in the lab's surgical theatre, Tom, who had come to seek Nathaniel's intervention, let out a sigh after Nathaniel's tense question and replied, "Anton likes Dawn." He paused, anticipating a response, though he couldn't quite understand why he expected Nathaniel to react. When he raised his eyes to meet Nathaniel's, he found the younger man glowering at him. "You did something to Anton, Tom?" Nathaniel probed, his tone tight with tension. "No, I didn't. Damn it, I told him, not in words, that I did not approve of him dating my daughter." "That's it," Tom replied. "That sounds pretty reasonable, but I'm sure there's a twist to the story somewhere. Knowing you, I'm sure you didn't just tell Anton you didn't want him dating Dawn, who I might add is a grown woman, Tom," Nathaniel retorted. Dr. Williams, Dr. Rowan, and Aria approached the adjoining door drawn in by the raised voices. Aria exchanged a concerned look with Dr. Williams, unsure how to intervene. "Fine, you're going to find out anyway, and that's why I'm here. Bella and Dawn are upset with me, and I needed to let Bella know why I thought Anton wasn't a good partner for our daughter," Tom said. Nathaniel immediately knew why Tom was acting strangely. He couldn't believe that the older man could be so easily triggered as to mix private matters with professional issues. He sat up from the bed and slowly swung his legs onto the floor. "You broke one of the major rules of Andrew's contract, didn't you, Tom?" Nathaniel stated in a deceptively calm tone. Dr. Williams cursed under his breath. Aria looked at him, bemused and lost at the gravity of what Tom had done. "I only told Bella, Nate," Tom quickly replied. "And Anton heard you?" Nathaniel pressed, his eyes as cold as ice. "No, Andrew heard me," Tom corrected. Nathaniel didn't quite know how to respond to that. "Dr. Williams, please help me call Andrew to come up here along with Anton," Nathaniel instructed. "Yes," Dr. Williams said, retreating to the other room to grab his phone. "I should go join Dr. Sterling," Rowan whispered to Aria. She nodded in understanding. Aria sensed Nathaniel's unnerving calm. It meant that any wrong word or action could provoke an explosion, and it was telling that Rowan had hurried off in fear for his life. She silently wished she understood enough of the situation to intervene. "You do realize, Tom, that if this gets out to the rest of them, it could create a crack in our relationship with them," Nathaniel said. "I know, I'm sorry," Tom replied quickly. "You know if Andrew leaves, I'll lose my security, all of them. Yet you broke his rule when there were other ways to get Dawn and Bella to see things your way," Nathaniel added. "I said I'm sorry, Nate," Tom replied in almost a growl. Aria could see that this would soon escalate into a shouting match, and she still didn't know how to intervene. Nathaniel's anger was rising, and the monitor tracking his heart rate began to spike, indicating he was triggered. While the experience might demonstrate the durability and compatibility of Nathaniel's new heart, she was not in favor of it. Soon enough, Dr. Williams returned and said, "Andrew is on his way. Please, gentlemen, let's calm down." Aria was relieved that at least one of them understood the gravity of the situation well enough to help calm the storm. Shortly after, the door opened and Andrew walked in, followed by Anton and Charles. Anton felt highly uncomfortable that the matter had escalated to involving the boss. He thought this was about him wanting permission to date Dawn. But then Nathaniel said, "I understand Tom owes you an apology, Anton. And you too, Andrew. I'm glad you're here, Charles." "Thank you, boss," Charles quickly replied. Anton furrowed his brow, wondering why Mr. Hill would owe him an apology. He figured Tom was simply being a father protecting his daughter, which shouldn't warrant this level of drama unless something else was going on that he wasn't aware of. "I'm sorry, Andrew. I was out of line," Tom said. It took a moment for Andrew to respond, a delay that made it clear to Anton that Mr. Hill must have done something seriously wrong. Anton's heart raced, anxiety creeping up with each passing second. When Andrew finally responded, he merely nodded, but Anton didn't miss the clenched jaw and the fists tightening at Andrew's sides. What exactly is Mr. Hill apologizing for? Anton asked, his voice low and hesitant. Aria, still standing nearby, was grateful for the question, as she too very much wanted to know. Tom stepped in front of Anton, holding his gaze. I brought up your past. I was going to use it to convince Bella that you aren't a reliable partner for our daughter. Anton clenched his jaw, giving the older man a sharp, searching look, his fists tightening even further. You tried to use the brutal murder of my brother and his pregnant wife to paint me as a madman, capable of killing my own family, Anton snarled. No, I was trying to use your conviction to suggest there was a possibility you could do something like that. I was wrong. Andrew overheard me and we argued. I'm sorry, Tom said. What did she say? Anton asked. What did Miss Bella say? She told me it was Dawn's choice and that I should stop meddling, Tom replied. Anton nodded and stepped back. As he made to turn away, Nathaniel stood up. Anton, Nathaniel called, making him pause. He was desperate. He was out of line. It won't happen again. I'm sorry. Anton nodded again, but didn't lift his gaze to look at Nathaniel. Charles and Andrew started toward Anton, but Tom stopped them with a raised hand. Stepping closer to Anton, he said, I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. As Bella said, Dawn is an adult. If she loves and chooses you, she must have her reasons, and I should trust and support her. That's what I'm going to do now. Please forgive me. Aria observed as the four men, Nathaniel, Tom, Charles, and Andrew, formed a circle around Anton, who kept his head lowered, refusing to meet their eyes. The tension in the room was palpable. Hey, Nathaniel said softly, placing a hand on Anton's shoulder. He could feel the rigid muscles beneath his touch, sensing that Anton was holding himself still, like a cornered animal barely keeping control. You're with family. Everyone here would do anything to protect you. Even Tom, despite his occasional foolishness, would never intentionally hurt you. Please, Anton, Nathaniel urged gently. Anton nodded once more, still not speaking. I didn't kill my family, boss, Anton said in a low, pained voice. I know, Nathaniel replied. Aria's vision blurred with tears as she watched Anton stand there, his shoulders slumped and head bowed. Even though he hadn't been responsible for his family's deaths, it was clear he blamed himself. Aria thought that instead of letting him bury those feelings, they needed to help him heal. She glanced at Dr. Williams, who was also looking down. She considered discussing the matter with Nathaniel, thinking he might allow the head therapist at Evergreen Memorial to handle Anton's therapy, and hoped Dr. Williams wouldn't mind. Aria slipped into the circle of men surrounding Anton, positioning herself between Nathaniel and Mr. Hill. She crouched down to bring her face into Anton's line of sight. When their eyes met, she beamed at him, causing the corners of his lips to lift in a semblance of a smile despite his mood. Would you like to take a walk with me? Aria asked softly. Anton hesitated before giving a nod. Nathaniel and the others stepped back as Aria gently took Anton by the wrist. Meeting Nathaniel's gaze, she added, Give us a few minutes, my love. Nathaniel's eyes crinkled with affection, and as Aria tilted her head in his direction, he stepped forward, kissed her tenderly, and then stepped back to let them pass. He let out a sigh and returned to the bed. Any news from Ethan? Nathaniel asked as he settled back on the stacked pillows. Dr. Williams hurried over to assist him. They've retrieved Mrs. Blackwood's body and are now heading to Sylvan Ridge, boss, Andrew replied. Nathaniel gave him a brief nod of acknowledgement before directing his attention to Tom. From this point forward, Tom, if you have a problem with any of my men, you bring it to me. I don't care whether it's personal or not, you come directly to me, got it? Nathaniel's voice was sharp, laced with an unmistakable warning. Tom gave a nod, then turned and walked away. Meanwhile, Aria still held Anton's wrist as they reached the elevator. She smiled at him as the doors slid closed and the elevator began its descent. Would you like to talk about what happened? Aria gently probed. No, Anton replied curtly, making Aria chuckle. Anton grinned slightly. Dr. Hawthorne had a motherly way of drawing people in, and although he truly appreciated her support, he wasn't sure if he was ready to burden her with his nightmares. Fair enough, she replied, but I can't help but notice that you feel some level of responsibility for the death of your brother and his pregnant wife, and that's something I'd like to help you with. Anton cast her a sideways glance. I was trained to protect people, that's what I did for the better part of my life. I never once failed at my assignment, but just one weekend with my brother, and I couldn't protect him or his family. I deserved everything I got back then, Doctor, Anton said, his voice edged with guilt. Let's unpack that statement, Arya said gently. Then we can decide if you even had a chance. Anton frowned at the statement. I don't think there's any excuse for me not being able to help, he replied. Trust me, Doctor, I was irresponsible. My negligence is why I have no family left. The elevator doors slid open, and the two stepped out into the foyer. Anton saw Dawn pacing by the stairs. He'd momentarily forgotten he'd told her to wait for him, and his heart tightened with feelings as she cast him a searching gaze, her eyes gleaming with worry and concern. She made to come to him, but then paused when she saw Dr. Hawthorne, her eyes darting with uncertainty. Anton extended his hand to her, and she hurried over to join them. He drew her to his side and said, Dr. Hawthorne, I'd like to formally introduce Dawn Hill as my girlfriend. Dr. Hawthorne smiled warmly at the two and pulled Dawn into a hug. Congratulations, she said softly. Thank you, Arya, Dawn replied, her eyes filling with tears. Anton smiled, watching her get emotional. He pulled out a handkerchief and gently dabbed her eyes, making her look up at him and laugh. Then he handed her the handkerchief before drawing her close again. Anton decided he would tell Dawn and Dr. Hawthorne his story. Though he wasn't going to reveal what her father had tried to do, he knew it would upset Dawn. But he wanted her to know his past so no one could ever use it against him again. Join us, Dawn. Dr. Hawthorne and I were just going for a walk, Anton said. Dawn eagerly nodded, and the three headed out together. Stepping outside, Arya took a deep breath, exhaling slowly as a smile spread across her face at the sight of the snowy landscape. It had been a while since she'd been outdoors, not since she had her babies, and she figured a walk would be a nice therapeutic change. Anton guided both women down the porch stairs with care, holding each of their hands. He smiled to himself, realizing that if either of them slipped, he'd rather risk hurting himself than let anything happen to his boss's wife or his girlfriend. A gentle smile played on his lips, eyes softening as they reached the stairs, landing safely. The holidays are approaching quickly, Halloween, then Thanksgiving, and before we know it, Christmas, Arya said. We have a bit of a different tradition around here, Anton said, wrapping an arm around Dawn's shoulders and pulling her closer. When she glanced up at him, he winked, and she smiled back, though he noticed how tired she looked. It tugged at his heart, making him want to kiss her, but with company around, he held back, hoping his eyes said what his lips couldn't. Really? Dr. Hawthorne asked, throwing him a curious glance and catching the exchanged look between him and Dawn. She smiled knowingly. Yeah. For example, tonight kicks off our bonfire night celebration. We gather on the northern wing, light the biggest bonfire near the pond, and set up tents a safe distance away. There's always music, dancing, drinking, you name it, Anton explained with a grin. That sounds like a lot of fun, Dawn said, her voice raspy from earlier tears. Anton couldn't help but press a kiss on the top of her head. It sure does, Dr. Hawthorne added, her voice wistful. Do you think the boss might be able to join us for a little while? Anton asked, giving Dr. Hawthorne a thoughtful look. We're taking things slowly, heading all the way to the northern wing, far from the medical monitors. Would probably be harder on me than him, she joked, causing both Anton and Dawn to laugh. He's lucky to have you, Dr. Hawthorne. We're all grateful for you, Anton said sincerely. I'm sure you've set a pretty high bar for the rest of us ladies, Dawn added, her tone slightly anxious. Anton chuckled. Dr. Hawthorne laughed, a little flustered. Oh, please. I'm just doing what I can to keep the love of my life with me. It's really selfish love, she said with a smile. We all deserve a bit of selfish love like that, Anton murmured, staring into the distance. Both Dawn and Dr. Hawthorne noticed his sudden shift in mood, exchanging a glance. Dawn looked curious, while Dr. Hawthorne's expression softened with understanding. Where are you from, Anton? Dr. Hawthorne asked, her tone gentle, shifting from casual to something more thoughtful and inviting. Dawn sensed the change, wondering what was behind it. I'm originally from Invercraig, a small town nestled in the Scottish Highlands. It's a quiet, peaceful place surrounded by rugged hills and dense forests. Growing up there made me appreciate the solitude and beauty of nature. That's probably why I feel so comfortable here. Even though we're in the middle of New York, the boss made it feel like we're somewhere hidden in nature," Anton said with a soft laugh. "My parents moved us to the United States when I was 16. My brother was 18 at the time. My dad was from a small town in Connecticut, and he met my mum on a vacation in Scotland. He was a Marine, and I always wanted to follow in his footsteps, but things didn't go the way I planned." Anton's voice lowered slightly. "My mum died while trying to have a third baby, and after that it was just me, my brother, and my dad. Then, when I was still young, my father was killed in the line of duty. After that, it was just me and my brother." Anton paused, his gaze distant for a moment before continuing. "I decided not to join the Marines after that. I couldn't leave my brother behind, not when he was all I had left. But I had a keen interest in computers. I was pretty good at hacking into just about anything. Computers, high-tech security systems, you name it. So I shifted my focus to that. And then, like a fool, I took a dare from my friends and hacked into a government security system. It was tied to missile launch codes." He chuckled briefly. "I thought it was a harmless prank at the time." Dawn and Dr. Hawthorne shared a look of astonishment. "Unbelievable," Dawn murmured. "Yep," Anton responded with a grin. "Honestly, boys can be terrifying. You all have this talent for pulling off the most recklessly stupid things without thinking of consequences," Dr. Hawthorne remarked, making Anton chuckle. "My consequences led me here," Anton quipped and continued. "Fast forward to the next night. I was at home with my brother and his girlfriend when there was a knock at the door. My brother answered, and there were two military men asking if he was Anton Cameron. Instead of answering, he asked them what they wanted. They tried to arrest him, and I ran out, yelling that I was Anton Cameron. They pushed my brother aside and grabbed me. One of them looked at me and said, 'You're in big trouble, young man.'" Anton shook his head with a grim smile. "They didn't even bother with a court case. I was thrown into a military prison. For a while, without giving my brother access to me. I thought I'd be stuck there, but then they needed someone with my skills to hack into a rival country's security. They gave me a choice. Either I could stay in prison, or I could join the army. I told them I wasn't interested in the army. I wanted to be in the Marines. And that's how it all started for me." "That's quite a journey," Dr. Hawthorne said softly, her tone tinged with admiration. Dawn snuggled closer to Anton. "How did you end up working for the Hawthornes?" she asked, but the moment the words left her mouth, she felt him tense. Her brows furrowed in concern as Anton pulled away, leaving a space between them. Alarmed, Dawn studied his face, but said nothing. "I had been in the Marines for close to 6 years at the time," Anton began, his voice quieter now. "Jake Darfield had been one of my commanding officers at one point, and honestly, if it weren't for him, I think I'd be dead." He paused briefly, then continued. "I was on vacation back here in the US. I kept an apartment in New York, but I always tried to spend as much time as I could with my brother in Cedarbrook, Connecticut. He lived in our parents' home. I wasn't around when he got married, but when he told me he and his wife were expecting a baby, I took time off to be with him and his family." Anton fell silent for a long moment. Dawn exchanged a worried glance with Dr. Hawthorne, who stayed quietly, her eyes downcast. She, too, remained silent. "Not a day goes by that I don't wish I hadn't gone back. Maybe they'd still be alive," Anton said quietly, his voice laced with regret. Dawn's heart sank, realizing why Dr. Hawthorne had come downstairs with him. Something had triggered this memory, and she couldn't help but wonder what. "During that vacation, my brother and his wife planned a night out, so I decided to drive back to New York to enjoy myself too. There was this bar on the Upper East Side, a place where you could find all kinds of fun. That's why I picked it," Anton explained, a bitter edge creeping into his voice. "Sometime during the night, I noticed something strange. Maybe it was my training, but I could tell something was off. Young girls, barely 16, were being led in, wearing masks, and ushered through a door in the corner of the club." He paused, shaking his head. "I should have just left it the hell alone, pardon my French, Dr. Hawthorne. But that's the only good that came out of this mess." I got nosy and hacked into the club's communications system, recorded every message and phone call. What I didn't know was that the FBI had been after these guys for a while. I stumbled onto their operation by accident. What I found was evidence of them trying to flee after a bust went wrong. So I wasn't just an eyewitness. I had solid proof. Anton sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. When the FBI raided the place, I slipped out, thinking I was in the clear, but they found me. They were questioning everyone, looking for witnesses, but the guys running this operation were about to get away. I had the evidence they needed, so I gave it to them, helped them track down the girls, and shut the whole thing down. He gave a mirthless chuckle. One of the men must have found out it was me, probably because I was the only Marine in the club with a hacking record. They waited until I let my guard down. I was back in Cedarbrook having a drink at a local bar. A pretty girl approached me and asked if I wanted a good time. I thought, why not? I had a few drinks with her, one thing led to another, and then I woke up the next morning. He stopped, taking a deep breath, his chest rising and falling heavily. I woke up in my brother's bed. My brother and his wife were lying on either side of me, dead. They were stabbed, and in my hand. His voice dropped to a low, gruff whisper was the weapon. Dawn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dr. Hawthorne's eyes filled with tears. "Oh my God," Dawn whispered, her voice barely audible. Anton nodded slowly. "I think I was the one who called 911. I can't remember clearly. I was destroyed," he murmured, his voice barely audible. The heavy weight settled in his chest once again as the memories surged back. His throat tightened and his words faltered, leaving him mute. His gaze had become unfocused, eyes glazing over as he'd stared into the distance, as if invisible walls were closing in around his mind, shielding him from the unbearable scene. When they arrived, they took the bodies away and I couldn't speak. I felt completely blank. It was as if I had instantly withdrawn into a cage in my mind to detach myself from what had happened. All they found were my fingerprints. Nothing else. I was arrested and convicted, and honestly, I was just a shell of myself. They claimed I had lost my mind, that my PTSD had kicked in and made me go crazy. I think the girl from the bar testified, saying I'd started off getting rough with her and then showed proof of abuse. I was locked up. Strangely enough, I didn't mind. With everything happening, I just wanted to be lost in my head and never have to face reality again. Then Jake found out. Anton released a shaky breath. I remember being brought into an empty cell block. And there they were, Jake Darfield with Andrew McLeod. His voice trailed off as his mind replayed the incident, each stab of anguish forcing him to confront the deaths of his brother and pregnant sister-in-law. "They came to hear your side of the story?" Dr. Hawthorne asked, when Anton didn't immediately continue. "No, they already had proof that I wasn't guilty," Anton replied. Dawn let out a sigh of relief. "So they came to get you out?" she probed, her interest piqued. "No, as a matter of fact, Jake came to beat me up, which was why I was taken to an empty cell," Anton quipped. Both women frowned at that information, probably thinking it was rather crude. "Trust me, I needed it. They both could tell what I was doing up here," Anton said, tapping his temple. "They knew I needed to snap out of it, so they came, and Andrew stood by while Jake riled me up enough to provoke an attack. I got the beating of my life," he said. Dr. Hawthorne exchanged a glance with Dawn. "That's rather strange. I think a therapist would have been more ideal," she remarked slowly. "A therapist would have wanted me to talk about my grief and try to help me cope with it. These men's mission was to make me feel the anger and pain and dig up the vengeful need within me to fight for justice. And they succeeded. I got my justice for my brother, his family, and me," Anton replied, omitting that the justice the women must think he sought wasn't how it actually went. Jake and Andrew had helped him track down the men one by one and deliver exactly what had been done to him. I understood what it meant to cross paths with Jake Darfield and Andrew McLeod. They stood by me, in front of me, and behind me through it all, and didn't rest until I was a free man. Then Andrew offered me a job. He gave me 2 weeks to think about it, but I replied immediately. Coming here felt like being given a new lease on life. I'm not going to lie to you. I had expected. I don't know what I had expected, but I hadn't anticipated being integrated into a new family, where I have brothers who would do just about anything for me, and a boss who treats me like part of his family. Dr. Hawthorne nodded in understanding. Dawn wanted to wrap her arms around him to comfort him, but the way he held himself straight showed that he wouldn't appreciate that. Dr. Hawthorne spoke up, her voice thoughtful. You said you had a few drinks with the woman you met at the club before the night you found your brother and sister-in-law dead. Don't you think blacking out like that was unusual? I mean, if you had a few drinks and still managed to have a fun night with her, you weren't so drunk that you couldn't function. Dawn's brow furrowed as she wondered why Dr. Hawthorne was pressing on Anton's open wound when it was clear he was already in pain. Anton's brows knitted together. If you're suggesting I was drugged, that was confirmed. She did drug me. I know that, Anton replied, his tone clipped. So if you had a few drinks, got drugged, and were framed for the murders of your family, retaliation for saving those girls, who without your intervention might have faced an even worse fate, why do you still blame yourself for their deaths? Dr. Hawthorne asked, stopping in her tracks and turning to face Anton. Dawn halted beside them, her eyes shifting between them. Anton shrugged, lowering his eyes to shield his emotions. Maybe what you need to remember are the faces of the girls you saved, Dr. Hawthorne urged softly. Your family didn't die in vain. They sacrificed their lives, and those girls are alive because of it. Maybe it would help to find out what those girls are up to now, see what they've become, and remind yourself that your brother, his wife, and their unborn child gave them that chance. Remember your family for that. It might help ease the pain. Anton let out a shaky breath, his expression tight with emotion. Dawn gingerly touched his hand, feeling him tense but not pulling away. Slowly she laced her fingers with his, and when Anton squeezed her hand, she sighed in relief. Thank you, Dr. Hawthorne, Anton said, his voice quieter but a bit steadier. I'll always be here if you want to talk more, Dr. Hawthorne offered with a kind smile. Or, if you'd prefer, I could refer you to a professional. I think talking to you sometimes will do, Anton replied with the faintest smile, surprised by how her words had lightened his burden, even just a little. Dr. Hawthorne nodded, still smiling, though she hoped that in time she could convince him to speak to a therapist, not just about his family's death, but about his experiences as an ex-serviceman that had left him scarred. I should head back inside, she said. Thank you for sharing your story with me, Anton. Anton gave her a polite nod in response. See you two later, she added before embracing both him and Dawn briefly before heading back toward the house. Once she was gone, Dawn looked up at Anton, concern etched in her features. Are you okay? She asked softly, stepping closer to cup his jaw with her free hand. Anton met her gaze, his eyes steady now. I am now, he said, giving her a small but genuine smile. Is this what you wanted to tell me? Dawn asked, her eyes filled with curiosity as she studied him closely. Anton nodded in response. Why would you think that hearing something like this would make me not want you, Anton, especially when you were cleared? She questioned, her voice soft but firm. I still feel responsible. There are people out there who believe I'm capable of something like that. I needed you to know, and to understand that I have PTSD before you fully commit to being with me, he admitted, his voice hoarse. My love for you isn't conditional, Anton. I love you no matter what. Whatever comes with the past, we'll handle it together, Dawn assured him gently. Anton hesitated, his uncertain expression causing a flicker of worry in Dawn's chest. Her heart quickened as she asked, Why did you need to tell Dr. Hawthorne about your past? What happened up there, baby? She pressed, sensing something more.